Is there any public who have something to say?
Yeah.
Hi, Jim. And I guess you're public to be heard.
We understand that you do not have a road for them. And,
We have an interim.
Huh?
We have interim.
oh, okay. We've been trying for a while to try to get right away for water and gas for our project on Morgan Road. And the select board can approve this.
Water and
Thank you.
Water and gas.
gas.
I don't think the water is actually on the public right away. We had a dig safe and it's actually on our property, according to dig safe, but I think dig safe is wrong, so. But we've created a debate amongst various parties because we took the select board's resolution concerning housing to heart.
Mm-hmm.
And we redesigned the project in terms of how could we be responsive to the new land development regulations? How could we be responsive to the community? And how could we be responsive to the select board resolution? Neither of those plans vary one iota with respect to the town right of way. The town road is the town road in all of the plans. The municipal water is where the municipal water is in all of the plans. Vermont Gas is a new opportunity that occurred in the past 60 days.
Oh, that's right, because it's on Packard Road.
It's on Morgan.
It's now on Morgan as well.
So, but for energy efficiency and a lot of other reasons, but we're up against the deadline. I have to have this work done November 15th.
Oh, geez.
And Champlain Water District has reviewed it. They've approved it. Town of Jericho, I believe John has asked the town engineer to review it. I don't know what he's going to review, but it's supervised. The actual tap to the water line is done, prescribed by one of two contractors from Champlain Water District. It's not done by our contractor. It's done by their contractor. It's supervised by Champlain Water District, and it's on our side of the road. So we're not digging up the right of way. We're going to be on the edge of it. I think it's down fairly deep, and I think it's on our land.
So sorry, Jim, is this a dispute? Like, is this, because we typically don't,
We're not able to, because of the circumstances, we're not able to get somebody to sign those two pieces of paper.
but who typically does it?
Normally
Typically,
the road for
yeah, typically it'd be the road foreman.
Oh,
And we've been using, in the absence of the road foreman, we've been using Tyler. But Jim, my understanding is we're super close.
Well, I am, to be honest
So
with
to
you,
have them, you know,
well, I mean, it's super if we're super close. You're the executive function for the town of Jericho. I have a very limited window to get this done. And there's no reason not to do it. It's very consistent with everything that you people have advocated for, directed employees and boards to be responsive of, and it's urgent. So
What's the specific request then?
to sign
Well, I know it's to sign. What's the request that we have to sign?
allowing Vermont Gas,
Yep,
represented by Kyle, who is the contractor that's been in your right of way for the last 5 months.
okay, allowing Kyle,
Kyle, PYLE, and then Champlain Water District's, either one of their two approved subcontractors, and then our digger, which is going to either be Moultrie or Jay Hutchins, depending upon schedule.
okay,
Because
but that was a clause. That was a clause, finish the sentence. So Pyle and Champlain Water District would. Could you,
Dig.
Vermont Gas is on the opposite.
sure. No, I'm just asking for the specific request. I mean, I flipped through that.
Authorization from
I'm so
the town
sorry.
of Jericho to enter its right of way is requested by Champlain Water District and by Vermont Gas.
Okay, all right, that's all I just wanted to know in one sentence what the request was.
Yes.
Okay.
And I have all the plans and prints and
Is there any reason that we need to do it instead of? I understand your time frame. I totally get that.
Yeah.
I've never had to do one of these, so I certainly would feel uncomfortable. It's been,
Well, we,
"Oh, all right,"
we
you
have,
know?
we have approved, things from, Vermont Electric and stuff when, like, they were doing that one, right away. They were doing, road work to go to a new development on the other side of Morgan Road, and we have to approve all those utility permits of sticking things in the right of way.
And we did that?
We did that.
Why would
See,
it
my
be in the
memory's not
town,
as
why
good.
would it be in the town's interest to not approve it?
I know.
Is there any reason?
Well, because, and we get
The
stuff,
only thing it feels like it might be, to me, it feels like we're stepping in between the road crew and Tyler of what they would normally do.
And it's not just the road group, it's been an ongoing dialogue with Tom and Chris. and
Okay,
okay,
I
So it's a longer-
I apologize. But from my perspective, it's not a matter of if the permit will be approved, it's when it'll be approved. Which will likely be Monday of next week.
that would be good, because it would help us timeline.
Outstanding information that was presented to Tom yesterday.
there is no missing information.
Okay, well,
And we prepared, this has already been approved by Vermont Gas and by Champlain Water District. It's approved by Jericho. We confused it by submitting an amendment to the PUD, which has absolutely nothing to do with entering the right of way. So any debate about zoning is a bogus debate. It has nothing to do with our entering the right of way to bring essential utilities onto the property. It was zoning, look at the form. It's the select board or the public works guy.
Right,
It's got nothing to do with zoning. It's
Yeah.
got nothing to do with any of the other stuff.
because typically when it comes to us, it's from the utility itself.
Which it sounds like we already have.
Yeah.
Or Jim just indicated that
Right.
they have.
We've already
Yeah.
granted the easement
Yeah,
to both Champlain Water. We've
Yeah.
Granted the easements to Vermont Gas.
yeah.
Jim, I want to be 100% clear. I think coming here in front of folks without them having the ability to understand what the process has been to date is kind of a power play. If the ball's moving down the field, I have no authority. I'll also say that on the record. But I think it's a little disingenuous to put them in a position of having to make a decision that they have no understanding of.
Well, the other issue is,
I'm absolutely not doing that, John. We totally disagree. They have the facts in front of them. No, they.
excuse me, the problem is we cannot approve anything in public to be heard because it's not listed in the agenda.
Well,
mean-
there's that too, but just the premise of working in good faith to get you your permit and to have you come here, ask them to sign off on something that they do not have the background or knowledge to sign off on, I think is disingenuous.
Done.
It looks like solar fields, huh?
Perfunctory. In other words,
Or
this
septic.
is an automated process.
And there has been nothing perfunctory about this project that it will see relationship.
Do you really want to have this debate in public, John?
No,
I don't
no.
want to have a debate. I'm just
No.
being 100%. clear.
I think what we can do, is see where things are on Monday and see what can happen to move things along. That's what we can do at this point, because we can't, it's not actionable because it's in public to be heard.
It doesn't require, all it requires is one of you to, in effect, do whatever it is that you've done 50 times.
I know, but that was it's always listed in the agenda, not in public to be heard. That's the key. We've never done an action item in the public to be heard. And I'm sorry about that, Jim, but that's just,
Well, just so you know, giving the three of you the information and the public the information and putting it in front of you is in fact transparent, because you are the people who are listed on the form, and the other person that's listed on the form is no longer active, doesn't work for the town any longer. And this process has been going on for a long period of time. And John's comments, I would suggest to you, demonstrate bias. And I am asking you to step forward and exercise your authority and take charge of this very reasonable request. Because it has nothing to do with anybody else other than you and Public Works. And if you want to involve the town engineer, that's great. But we've been through the engineering with both Champlain Water District and with Vermont Gas, and they're just waiting for a normal sign off for them to be able to enter the right of way, because they would probably have normally done it without it. But because of all the noise that's been made, it seems to be an issue.
Understand, I totally understand, and I know you're under a time frame, and I think we can check on this on Monday and see where things are. But I don't want to start doing things in public to be heard, even though this is all in public, because
It's not warned. No,
it's
no one
not
had a
warned.
chance to think about it. Yeah, I think I think what's frustrating is getting a little hot, but I think we're all kind of on the same page. I think we all kind of want to get it done and
Get it
do
done.
it and
Yeah.
whatever. So
Right.
I understand your time crunch. So I like Catherine's idea. Like if we're in trouble Monday, we can come up to town hall and sign. I don't know. We can do whatever, you know,
Yeah,
we can do
we
what
do
needs
what
to be
we
done.
we need to
But-
do.
I see, yeah, I see no reason at this point. I do not see where it's in the town's interest to deny this
Right.
request. But when it actually happens, I'll just leave to the chair. Seems pretty straightforward to me.
Yeah.
I do want to say, it's nothing to do with what we just talked about. But from both a personal level and for my family, we are incredibly grateful for the service that Wayne has delivered to the town. That's not meant to put him above anybody else, but the sacrifice that you've made. And you, and I know that you're not my best guy, because most of the time you disagree with. But it is nice to see the quality of the service and the capability and the efforts that you've made on behalf of this community. And I'm proud to be in this community when you've got people of your caliber that's willing to sacrifice.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
Well said.
That's nicely said, because I was going to do that in public to be heard too.
And I'm not. You guys will all have your time.
Thank you.
But that's true. That was one of the things I was going to do in public to be heard, because I was waiting for other business.
There's plenty other people in the same caliber or not.
But I was going to, say that this is officially Wayne's last meeting, which is sad.
Well, that was part of the reason why I was.
But at the same time, we certainly will miss him because of his his thoughtful responses. But yet in times there were these impassioned responses depending on the topic.
Totally agree.
Yeah, there's certainly.
I like those the most. I think.
And
If they
so,
happened all the time, they wouldn't be
Makes me-
nearly as fun, but when
Right.
they're so rare and it's
Yeah,
so common measure, every
exactly.
now and then you get one. Yep.
exactly.
Those
I
are-
mean, and so, yeah, he will be missed. There's no question.
Well,
You will
thank
be
you.
missed.
Yeah, it's like attending your own wake. It feels like.
Well, there's a lot of Irish songs about that. So
We should have had an open bar on the side. That would have helped.
Oh. Oh, wouldn't it? Yeah, especially tonight. We might
All
need
right,
it.
so,
Yes, so
for public,
is there any other, anybody else on Zoom that is public to be heard? Oh, my
I
God.
don't believe so.
Oh, good. I got itchy.
Good.
Good. I got itchy eye. Okay, so next is then, we have, Jericho, JES Hockey Rink funding request from Glenn Steinman. Oh, God, the eye's burning already.
Technically, it should say ice rink, Glenn. Apologize for that.
Okay,
oh,
That's
thank
okay.
you.
so,
Thank you for
We don't want
clarifying.
to pigeonhole the usership.
Yeah,
yeah, ice rink.
And
Okay,
just so you know, if you have further questions, I'm looking down the list. The president of PI is here, Laura, and some other, Kevin is also a PI member who are both really familiar with this request and project as well.
well, you want to take just a few minutes to explain what you're asking for so that it's on the public record?
Actually, John has all the information.
Yeah, we do.
We had started maybe last summer. The idea was floated to put an ice skating rink on the Jericho Elementary School basketball court. It's a great place, location for it. Uh, we've been kind of floating that around for years, and then we we got a donation of enough skates and helmets,
Oh, wow.
supply the entire school, so it's something we could teach. But of course, that
That's
became
impressive.
oh yeah, it's a great program. And then uh, from there, we got the permissions. We got the we passed over the liability hurdles, um,
Yeah, that would be.
and all the uh, got approval from administration. Uh, a couple of weeks ago, uh, we sent out survey on Front Page Forum from to the community to see if there would be some interest, because we realized there had to be some fundraising to go along with this. Uh, from the surveys, it was just overwhelming.
Yeah.
Well over 100 folks were in favor of it. The two people that were not said they'd give money towards it. There was probably about 20 people who said they would help maintain it. So it became pretty clear that we could go forward with the project and go forward with some fundraising. During that fundraising period, which has only been about 2 weeks, I'd say, uh, approximately $3,700 has been raised. In some of the emails that went back and forth from people who took the surveys, somebody recommended that we reach out to the town and say that, thinking that they might want to support this, a community rink, uh, and so I did. I reached out to John, and John gave me some more information from I think about the Underhill rink. Uh, so our small kind of budget of around, I'd say, from $5,000 to $7,000 as a goal. Um, if we were going to do the same thing that at Underhill did, is it Underhill or no, Underhill? It went from a smaller project to something really special, which would be more along the lines of $1,400, $1,300 or $1,400. Part of this project that makes it more accessible than most projects is that because we have all this equipment, the skates and the helmets, we can also offer a what I call a ice skate library. So any child in the district who does not have access to skates, or parents don't have access for their children, can sign out a pair of skates and a helmet. We do this all the time with other types of equipment, cross country skis, snowshoes, and the like. And so we have kind of a choice. We're at these crossroads. We can put in something homemade, which might not be as great, or we can ask the town for some funding and put in something that's really special, has great lighting, and is sustainable, and what we believe could be a great asset to the community. I'm actually kind of surprised, having taught for nearly 20 years at Jericho Elementary School, that the town doesn't have a ice skating rink. So, we're asking for some funding. There are some proposals on John's computer. John, did you share those?
Yep, they've got them.
Yep.
So you have some of the survey results. Since then, more people have come up and in favor. That survey was put out. I think, like I said, 2 weeks ago, roughly, and more people have responded in favor.
How long was the rink last? Do you have any idea?
The one that actually John came up with this, the Iron Sleek, that's a
Yeah.
steel rink that will last. I mean, if we maintain it well, forever. The only thing that we would need to replace would be the liner every year, which only runs about $600 or $700. which is money that I raise for Pi every year and intend to continue, that I would just direct some of my fundraising towards Pi. Pi is the Parents Teachers Association, and since they're a nonprofit LLC, instead of putting money into the school district account, it's much cleaner when we do it through the Parents Association.
I just offer a couple things. First, Glenn, I want to make sure to say hello from my wife, Susan Merriam, who worked with you at the high school, at the elementary school for a while. I want to say I was involved in establishing an ice rink in Addison County that we had for about 10 years. This is a specific request for money from the town. It sounds like you already addressed the liability. I know when we did it, the parent group took out $1 million liability insurance policy every year. It didn't cost anything because the rink was out there. I don't know what Laura agreement you have with the school. It doesn't even matter to me. I just know that liability was a big issue, and I hope that either you or the school have addressed that. My only concern, presently we have ARPA money. I'm not sure I would be as inclined to be writing a check for school equipment in a normal budget cycle because but ARPA is a little bit different. So maybe, it's kind of a one-time thing. My only concern though is a number of years ago, we put, and I'll just mention this, there's nothing to be done about it right now. From the floor, somebody voted $80,000 to redo the tennis courts. And I'm just hoping with the weight that the high ice rink will put on top of one of those tennis rinks that in a couple of years, we're not looking at redoing the surface of the tennis court because we've had 2 tons of water sitting on it over the winter. I'm not saying anything needs to be done about that right now, but that's my only sort of, because town was on the hook for that 80,000. That 80,000 that came for the tennis court didn't come out of the school budget, it came out of the town budget. And so eyes wide open, I think it's a great community thing. I heard you say lights. I'm okay with the lights, but I don't live next to the tennis court. But I think it's a great thing to extend activity at the school.
So just want to address 2 of those issues because we actually have some pretty good answers for that. The insurance is covered. If we put it on the basketball court, it is covered specifically through the VISBIT policy. It would be if it's owned by the school and on school land, all the other liabilities are covered. We have another rink in Richmond that falls under the same, has been operating for 2 years at Richmond Elementary and falls under the same policy. So that's absolutely covered. The town would not be on the hook for any damages because it's a weird setup, but the town owns the basketball courts. I'm sorry, the town owns the tennis courts, the school owns the basketball courts. So should there be damage, it would be the school that is liable.
Oh,
And the kits that we're looking at,
who knew?
Yeah,
yeah, no, I know, it's crazy.
but it is weird that we ended up with the tennis court.
But
It was the MMU.
yeah, it is kind of strange. But to answer you, I mean, it wouldn't be a town liability, although we're all obviously connected, but that's school property. The lighting, fortunately, the basketball court is not located near a house. It's on the other side, closer to the school. I think that addressed all of, and the kits that we're buying are specifically made for hardcourt surfaces. So my belief, and I don't have great experience with building ice rinks here. So there's a lot of experience out there. John had done some research. I know that, and brought brought to us to this particular company, which is the Iron Sleek proposal. And they have a product specifically made for hard surfaces.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Any questions?
I don't have any questions. I know Glenn does great work. He started the ski program that he started in time for my second daughter, not in time for my first daughter, and so I got to volunteer for that, which was great. So you know, I think this is a really good thing. I personally don't know how to skate, and I bet you part of it is because we didn't have one of these at JES when I went there, which was a few years ago now.
Just a few years.
Yeah, so I think it's a great idea.
What's the dollar request?
Right here.
So there's $2 requests, it looks like, and it sounds like
It's the 9,000, we would put it the $9,000 one.
well, the 12,000 one, right?
Yeah, he's asking for $9,561.82.
Which is, but that would give us the second one
Yes,
because he already has the 3, right?
right.
Okay.
Right. And to be spent with, use ARPA funds, so
Yeah.
that would be the motion.
All right, so I'll make this motion. Well, I was gonna let Wayne do it, but there's another one coming up that I think Wayne should do. So I would like to make a motion to approve the request for funds for a ice rink at Jericho Elementary School for the amount of $9,561.
Yep.
To come
Jen-
out of our
Jen-
ARPA funds.
And that gives you the 12,000
Did we
something.
do the math right, Glenn?
That unfortunately, because I'm on my home computer, I don't have the proposal right in front of me.
Well, I took
We're looking-
the 1,900 and, sorry, maybe it's 61.
Yeah, 9,000, I thought it was $9,861, $561.
Yeah, my.
Is that for the iron, John, is that for the Iron Sleek?
Correct.
Yeah, that's the one we're looking for.
I subtracted 3 from that. And,
Yeah.
came up with $9,561
Great.
To spend ARPA funding on.
out of the ARPA funds. And I think Wayne makes a good point. I think we wouldn't be as loose with it if it
Right.
was typical town budget money, especially with some upcoming stuff that we have. But this is, to me, this is the exact kind of stuff that ARPA funds are going to help with. You know,
Well-
we've heard we want community places, we want a place where people can get together.
And
So
we,
to me, this fits.
and
that.
we've already funded a 9-hole disc golf
Oh,
course.
yeah, I forgot about that.
That's true. All right, so I second that motion.
All those in favor say aye. Well, thank you.
Presto, you have $9,000.
Send
Yeah.
my love, and I appreciate all that you folks do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Laura. Thanks. I can't read your name.
That's Kevin.
Kevin. Thanks, Kevin.
All right. Well, this is a unique part of the evening because Wayne is leaving us and we're going to interview 4 candidates to replace him. And 7 questions were asked of the candidates for written responses, and our questions now are going to be based on those requests. And the questions so that it's in the record and people understand if they watch this on MMC's TV or follow up. The candidate questions were, what specifically motivated you to run for the interim select board position, and what specific community issues or concerns would you hope to address during your tenure? 2, can you share a bit, Ray, experiences that you've had with local, state government or community organization involvement that has prepared you for this role on the select board? 3, the top 2 priorities that Jericho residents identified in our community survey soliciting input on 1.5 million allocation of ARPA funds were clearly 1, housing affordability, and 2, wastewater and community water, natural gas infrastructure to support development of affordable housing. What would your suggestions be in addressing these priorities to ensure that younger, older, and more diverse residents can find suitable and affordable housing in Jericho? 4, transparency and public engagement are crucial for local government. How would you propose to involve residents in decision-making processes and keep them informed about select board activities? How would you manage an impassioned, non-regulated resident who is being disruptive or disrespectful to you and others on the select board during a meeting? 5, what is your perspective on potential changes to our current municipal government structure and shifting from a 3 to 5 person select board, a town manager versus administrator? What do you see as the benefits and or liabilities of each of these changes? 6, development and management of our roughly 3.25 million annual budget is a primary responsibility of the select board. Can you share your approach to budgeting and managing municipal finances effectively? In the next few years, Jericho residents may be faced with the reality of needing to bond both community wastewater facilities and new town maintenance facility. What is your understanding of these priorities and suggested ways to accomplish them with minimal impacts to the taxpayers? 7, Chittenden County has a growing and more diverse population, ethnicity, socioeconomically, gender, sexual orientation, etc., and a variety of community needs, infrastructure, affordable housing, childcare availability, etc. As Chittenden County grows outward, how would you represent and serve the interest of a growing population of historically underrepresented residents and make Jericho a more welcoming and inclusive community that it can be? And that's for the record. And what we're going to do is each select board member can take up to 10 minutes of your 30-minute time. And our first candidate is Sarah MacLeod, and we will start with Wayne and his questions because it's his night.
Welcome, sir.
And welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you
Welcome.
for funding the ice rink. I donated to their,
Oh, how nice.
well, it's right, I mean, it's right there. You can walk to the elementary school.
That's right. You can. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now if they have an ice rink, I won't have to have an ice rink in my yard. So
That's awesome. Flyer for them. Awesome.
I'm good with a shovel.
That's work.
Maybe you could, I don't want to go question by question down these, because your answers, especially at the beginning ones, about your background, affordability, housing affordability, but maybe you could just talk a little bit more about the pluses and minuses of these governance issues related to the number of select board members or town manager. I'm just wondering, what your thoughts are. It's easy to, I think many of us struggle with wanting to increase the efficiency of not only the efficiency of the government we have here, but the capacity of the government we have here. And it's easy to have a knee-jerk reaction. Well, let's just get some more select board members. That's going to help. What's your take on how specifically those governance changes might assist in us increasing our capacity? Is probably a better word than efficiency. Increasing our capacity here. What are your thoughts on that?
So I want to say my views are heavily influenced by the last 5.5 years that I've been working on the planning commission. So I see the volume of work that we send to you, and I know that we are only one small part of the work that you have to get done. The expectation that only 3 people can thoughtfully process that amount of information, I think is sort of silly, first of all. And then second, what I've seen as successful is that we have 7 people on the planning commission, and we've been able to move through a mountain of work. And that is really, it's a heavy lift, and it really does take 7 people in varying degrees of capacity and engagement, just the 7 of us, with, again, very different experiential sort of views on the work that has to be done for the planning commission. And that's really helpful because it allows us to work through a lot of the topics a lot more quickly, because we have, like, I'll speak for myself, a realtor on the commission. We have an architect, we have someone with healthcare background, we have someone who runs their own company. We have all these different professional people with their lived experience and as citizens of the town, and who are giving their volunteer time like you're doing. But we have the advantage of being able to work offline in groups of 2 or even 3, because that's not a quorum. And that allows us, again, to really plow through a lot of work that otherwise it is impossible to think that we would have gotten to the place that we are today with the town plan. Or some of the, like the ADU zoning changes or the other things that we've done. Changing things in government is slow work. And to think that you're gonna do it in 2 hours, 2 Tuesdays a month. And make any kind of forward progress. Is. Again, just seems foolish.
How would that impact the actual, I think it's been a sea change in that years ago, there was an unspoken dictum to the select board, which is keep increases to COLA and don't rock the boat.
Sure.
We're a bedroom town. That was never said, but that was the direction.
When I moved here 16 years ago, I 100% agree that was the direction.
Now there's the sense, I don't know if expectations have increased, but there's the sense, and then you have anti-government people. Those people are sitting on their rear ends and are not doing anything. And if they did, we'd get more stuff done. Now we realize it's capacity. It's not necessarily so-and-so's not doing their job well.
Correct.
There aren't enough so-and-so's doing the jobs.
Correct.
And we discovered that a little bit with the highway department. How would you think this change of government might impact who or the numbers or the working conditions in the building to increase capacity that way?
So I'm from a business background and now I'm more or less an independent contractor, really. As a realtor, that's what you are. I work for a brokerage. I hang my shingle is the term that the state uses. So I get to make the entrepreneurial decisions for myself. But I've run large teams and I've worked in a multinational company with hundreds of people and lived abroad and worked for that company and other companies as well. And the really clear solution in so many cases is to reallocate resources. And I know that's not easy to be fluid in that way in government. But we have an opportunity to reallocate resources in terms of adding to the select board. And I would say, sure, if we accomplish as a town all the things that you put in those questions about wastewater and housing and recreation and community spaces and all the things that people are asking for us to evolve as a town and not be so exclusionary, not be a bedroom community, not be so homogenous, then maybe we could go back to a 3-person select board because the 5 people might be bored and no one would run. Right? If we ran out of things to do, wouldn't that be great? But to not take advantage of the opportunity in front of us in that we have already changed our charter and done the motions to allow for a 5-person select board. To not then ask the citizens again, is that something that they would like to do? I remember when the last time it was on the ballot, I voted against it. I'm not pro big government. But I also now see firsthand the amount of work that needs to be done and what the people are asking for us to accomplish. And it's feels like a very logical step to have a bigger select board so that they can do more work, again, offline work, other processing of information in a thoughtful way instead of feeling like each single person needs to process all of that information separately and only speak about it together in a healthy discussion when you're together on camera. Not everyone processes that way. A lot of people need to process by small conversations, one-on-one conversations, which I would also say is another reason to have a select board with more members, because there are a lot of people in this town who have a lot of great inputs, a lot of great things to share, and thinking that they're gonna have the time to be heard by only 3 available listeners, maybe is not also reasonable.
Okay, thank
Right?
you.
To put that on 3 people, it's a lot.
Do you have any other?
That would be my main focus. The other thing I wanted, just some thoughts about bonding, because I loved I find it mind-boggling that we have not taken advantage of these tools. Could you say a little bit more about that?
So,
It's the same thing I did.
Sorry.
It's okay.
okay, so interest rates, a 30-year fixed rate mortgage just hit 8%, which it hasn't done since 2009. We could have, we could have saved so much money if we had bonded, if we had a municipal budget program 5 years ago, before COVID, if we had that in place, if we did that kind of planning as a town, we could have looked outward and looked around and said, what do we want to do in the next 10 years that we could move forward and do today at 3%, 2.5%, 2%, instead of 6, 7, 8%. And we could have bonded for a third of what it will cost us now for a $500,000 bond for a town garage. That is where my goal was, which is math based. I'm a math mind, and I've done a lot of planning with hundreds of millions of dollars, and that is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, but we can't get that time back, right?
Right.
But we can have a budget that looks forward 10, 15, 30 years. We can start that process to build that plan. And then when that opportunity comes back around, we can take advantage of it. Or if we can't wait for that opportunity, at least we have a roadmap of how to bond. Bonding is a tool. It allows municipalities to borrow money for long-term projects. It is not, it's just like, again, just like a 30-year mortgage. It's very common, it's very normal, it's not that scary. It's important and it's a tool, it's not a trap.
Thank you. Go for it.
Oh, gosh. So I like Wayne's questions. Bonding is, I think bonding is an interesting one because I just have no experience with it. I just think of it as, I get it's just a loan, but I have no experience with it at all. So I think that's an interesting perspective. Let's see, what do I have here? You're pushing the town plan.
Yeah.
What's your favorite part about the plan as it changes from what the current plan is compared to what the proposed plan is?
So the current plan is an echo of decades of that bedroom community mentality of wanting to maintain the status quo, wanting to be pristine and bucolic and quaint. And I personally don't think we have to sacrifice those things in order to grow and make space for an aging population and make space for a population of people who can afford to live in this town and work in this town and fill some of the open positions that we have in the municipal services and teaching and everything else. But right now that doesn't exist. And our growth is hampered both by our zoning and also by our by the town plan not facilitating more affordable housing or more growth.
So what do you think is if you had to pick two of the things in the new plan that start to get us there, what are they?
Well, my favorite part of the new plan is that we hammered really hard on the consultant and also on the process to try to simplify the plan to make it so that you open it up and you're immediately faced with a very short.
I do like that. I will admit I like that part.
Because I am, again, I'm a math mind, I'm very logical. I just want to see the to-do list and then I want to go through and make notes and be like, oh yeah, page 28 is where I can read more about this. Or I can see in the appendix in volume 3, the survey about transportation and the map that was done in, gosh, 2012 or something. Like I can go and reference all of those to-dos, but it's right there, very digestible, very directive. And then my second favorite part is the 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, so that, and again, it maps it out. It's like, and it gives accountable people, which is not to say that those are the only people who have to work on that task. It's just to say those are the people who are going to drive the bus and drive that process forward. So those are my two favorite parts.
Simpler, more directive. Got it.
And it's not, coming out of thin air. It's a direct result of all of the feedback we have heard. For forum and our in-person feedback session, people coming here to speak. To the planning commission, and hopefully what you've all heard too, and through the ARPA survey, as well, we're talking about all that.
Thank you.
Another one?
I don't have any others.
Okay. Well, mine is sort of a version, the first one I had was a version of what you just asked, but I'll go in anyway. You know, and it's very clear from your response that you're very proud of the work and all that the PC has done with the outreach for this new plan. I mean, it has the most public outreach we've had. But given that, you know, your motivation is to see the plan adopted and actioned, to you, what are the most important items and how would you prioritize them to be done?
I think the two, I only can speak for myself, not.
Right. That's because it's your question.
I think that the two most important things are moving the process forward on municipal wastewater. And, it's a tough one, probably capacity, although I would say that's almost a tie with having a budget plan. Yeah, that's again, like the whole entire plan, that's many years out. Not just like, here's the budget for next year, but the whole.
A 5-year plan or a 7-year plan, whatever.
Right, because if you, again, I'll just equate it to something that's really normal for me. If you are part of a condominium HOA, you know that within, and the condo HOA covers exterior maintenance, you know that within 25 years, the roof needs to be replaced, within 15 years, the entire parking lot needs to be paved. You have a wastewater expense every year, if you're not on municipal wastewater, you have a stormwater overflow that has to be requalified. You have all of those things, and they're stacked out years in advance so that you don't have two giant costs within the same 2 or 3 year period. And that's what budgeting is,
Mhm.
you know, and you can be very like Vermonty about it. Like if you own a clapboard house, if you're an old school Vermonter, you paint one side every year, and on the 5th year, you paint the garage. And that's how you keep a clapboard house painted without the paint peeling and not it looking like that.
I lived next to somebody who did that for 20 years, one side every year.
Yep,
It
right.
works, but if you
I
don't
have to.
have a plan in mind, then you kind of sit on it and you go, oh, I won't paint it this year, I'll paint it in 5 years, and on the 5th year, you realize your roof needs to be replaced, and then you don't have any money. Or whatever it is, that's what planning is about.
All right, there's been a lot of talk about the government style as well. What do you see as the difference between a town manager and an enhanced town administrator, and what do you see for the management of the town?
So I think it's a little misty in between the enhanced town manager and the town administrator. Or I'm sorry, an enhanced town administrator and a town manager. So my goal is to choose and advocate for whichever role has more autonomy and ability to make the day-to-day choices. Both because I think that person would be, if the right person were located and hired, would be not only capable, but also able to take some of that work off of the select board and some of the day-to-day choices. Again, could be presented as this is what we're doing, and it follows the town plan and it follows the budget. And this is what we're doing. And if all of those plans and documents line up, it's really easy to have an autonomous person. So again, no job is easy, so I don't want to say that the wrong way. What I mean is they have their marching orders, they have a roadmap. And right now, I don't think it would be great to increase the capacity of the town by having that person, but until we adopt a new town plan and vote a budget, it would be not a good thing to hire the person immediately. But I know that whole process takes about a year just to get that approved and move through all of the different, the public outreach and proposals. So I think that would give time to get everything else ready.
Okay, because we did ask similar question, because all of us went, oh, there's one that everybody had, and then of course, once it's gone, it's
I
gone.
know. I like the idea of having them, the questions all ahead of time.
Yeah.
And it leaves us kind of like, well, we already know the answer,
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, we already do.
But I also think it's important to give the candidates a chance to like get
Yes.
in front of anyone watching.
Well, in fact, that was the, that was the rest of my note, because, the select board is asking the questions tonight and without input from the public. But the public gets the final say at town meeting. But we felt this discussion should be in public so that people could understand who the candidates are and some of the background and what their thinking is, so that there is more information out there for the public when it comes to town meeting in 4 months.
Okay, but are you still looking for an interim person or are you gonna stay till?
Well,
No,
see, the key is there is the interim person.
Yeah.
But that interim person has to run for the select board to fill out his last year of his term at town meeting,
If they want to.
if they want to.
If they want.
So that's the key right
I
there.
have very limited political aspirations. I'm not gonna lie to you. No, I see it as a bit of a conflict of interest. I think it sounds pretty self-serving for someone, again, who's a realtor by day. To go and push their agenda, which is more development, build more houses. That feels like a conflict of interest to me. Maybe not everyone feels that way. If you know me, I don't think you would feel that way, but that's not.
That's interesting.
I don't feel like defending that position, I guess is what I would say. And again, I have limited political aspirations. And I see how much work it is. If it was a 5-member select board, I would give it some really serious thought about running. Because then I don't think there would be as much scrutiny on a personal level. And the workload would be spread out more. But right now, I treasure my time with my kids and they still want to be with me. And
That's
I know-
nice.
I know that's only gonna last like maybe 3 more years.
It is time limited. There's no question about it.
Yeah, my 7th year just turned 13. In 3 years, he'll have a car. And then he and his brother, who knows?
Let alone
I
wanting
don't
to
like-
take the,
I don't like
when
that
you go on
math.
vacation with the
I
parents.
don't like that math.
So like dad of a 6th grader, I know.
Yeah,
Yes.
And 8.
yeah,
And
they
it's
certainly,
It's a short window
Yeah.
right now.
and they certainly don't like to go on vacation together after a while either.
Yes, no.
And I'm on the other end of that now.
Yeah.
Now I just want to putter around the kitchen, cutting up apples,
Yeah.
miles for the kids to eat and playing in the mud.
Exactly.
I don't care about anything else anymore. I'm at the all the way other end.
And hopefully you can enjoy it a little bit more.
So I appreciate, and Eric
Yeah.
struggles with that too.
Yeah, he
It's
has been,
grueling.
yeah.
The
yeah.
position can be grueling. And if you've got kids who are hanging on you, they need you for something.
Yeah.
Even if they're not hanging on you, but you got to be around.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
That's hard.
If they're not.
really
hanging
hard.
on me.
And you want to go to their events.
Yes, I want to go to all of the soccer games and basketball games and baseball games and speed races. And I coach soccer and I'm the treasurer of the Little League and I do the planning commission. Like I believe in civic service.
Are you on, was Browns River Little League, was that where, was it Bill Ulrich or who's the guy who ran the baseball league for a bazillion years? Do you know who I mean?
Bill Euler.
Euler.
Yeah.
This is the same thing?
Oh, yes, a Little League right over here.
I mean, he did it for years and years. Talk about community person.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, we have a great team that Little League.
I will say, being such a small town, it's hard for anything to come up that isn't some sort of conflict of interest,
Yeah.
right? Because you know people, you're near people, like
Your
there's-
friends.
your friends, like, so.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, like, I don't advertise, I don't pay for leads from Zillow or anything, like, I get all my business because people know me and they send their friends and family to me.
Right.
Which is how I prefer to work. So it would, yeah,
And clearly, it suits you.
it's working great, I like it, I have a good time. More houses.
Well, you have a few more minutes. Anything you want to tell the us and the public about yourself or, we have all that things. I mean, sorry, my knee is shifting.
About myself. Let's
Yeah.
see.
Anything you want the public to know or us to know, but we have answers, of a lot of nice things that you've done, but something that you might want the public to, more to know more about you.
I think I've said a lot already. I think I would just reiterate like my professional background before my current job was deep in managing large sums of money and budgeting over long periods of time. And I enjoy it. And I don't get to do that now. And I think there's a big need for it here. And it can have a really positive impact in, again, helping things just run smoothly over time. So it's a lot less overwhelming.
Great.
Well, thank you very much
Thank you
for your
very much.
taking
Thanks for
time.
coming in.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Can we move the town library up? Wait, hold on.
We only have about 2 minutes,
Okay.
so I don't think we can move the town library up.
Patching in or is he gonna come here?
He's patching in. He's in the waiting room. We can let him in whenever you're ready.
Oh, he is.
Okay, yeah, let him in then.
Okay, but Jeff's gonna just have to hang out.
And as we're going to rotate, you get to go next.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
I figured that it's not,
Yeah.
I'm always talking. So I thought this would make it nicer. That
There we go. There we go.
He is.
Indeed. Good evening, folks.
good
Evening.
evening.
I'd like to extend my appreciation to allowing me to do this via Zoom. It was a pre-existing visit by my mom, and unexpectedly my wife had to go to Boston, and I did not wish to leave her alone with my 2 dogs.
Yeah, considering the size of that one dog.
And she's a gamer, but she is 84, and it's just not. I got to be respectful there.
Yeah, he's really a pretty dog.
Yeah, it's actually just like what the Nolte's have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Joel, we are taking turns going first as we work our way through these. So Catherine has put me up first. So the idea is we're each gonna have, so we have your responses,
Okay.
which we appreciate you sending in, and then each of the select board members will ask around 10 minutes worth of questions. I'm not sure that I have 10 minutes worth, but the previous candidate, her responses sort of led to kind of answered this question. So this will be a good question to ask you. Overall, what do you think is the most important thing that the select board could and should do over, say, the next 2 years that is tangible, that will start to move the town towards where we need to be?
That's a fantastic question, and I'm not just placating there. It really is something that I've been mulling over, and there's a tendency for people to overreact and want to rip the Band-Aid off, but I think it's more of an existential kind of a question of sentimental versus critical thought on how to do these things. And I get the sense that this town is wrapped up in a sentimentality that's holding back the critical aspects of moving forward, which, if you drill down a little bit, it actually it's contradictory in nature, because to be able to protect the traditional aspects of Jericho, we need to be able to harden them and focus on building out the town responsibly, so that we don't end up with more traffic problems or such and such because we didn't want to invest in someone's field or something. So, you know, what we've talked about over the past few years, the idea of shifting over from a town administrator to a town manager is, I think it's a valuable and profitable maneuver. And the idea of potentially having this conversation with Underhill could also be a solution to it. That is something that Representative Groening had mentioned to me. I personally have something that I think is going to be a little bit of a fly in the ointment, and that is switching permanently to an Australian ballot. And that is because, you know, as a town of inclusion, as part of our core beliefs for the community, having a small portion of the population dictate rules and regulations once a year is a form of voter disenfranchisement, whether we want it to be or not. It truly is, where we don't have, I think, a responsible representation at town meeting day for a town the size that we have. And that's something I think would be beneficial. You know, I'm not gonna die on these individual hills, but I think that there are hard questions that at least need to be asked and looked at. And of course, overall infrastructure, and asking ourselves as a community, where would we develop? You know, you take a look at the tax base, and we've got probably what 2,000 plus acres that are between either UVM or Jericho Land Trust or Vermont Land Trust that are protected. So where do we want to develop, if at all, some sort of an economic livelihood in this town? And clearly there's interest in it. I mean, every community around Jericho is investing to a degree, and we seem to be just kind of, I don't want to say we're indecisive, but we're an island that doesn't seem to know what the next step would be in terms of moving forward. I don't know if that answers your question adequately, or if it drums up additional questions.
Sounds like your answers are figuring out how and where to build, shifting from a town administrator to a town manager, and then figuring out with infrastructure how and where we should develop. That's kind of what I heard in that.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Australian ballot instead of town meeting, which is probably a lightning rod, but
yeah, it's a hard pill.
Certainly hear you.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have time?
Can I elaborate on ignoring the sharing of one with Underhill part of it, just for this purpose of this question? How do you, and I'm stealing a question that Wayne also asked, but so how does that help? How would that help us? So if John were a town manager instead of a town administrator, how does that, how do you see that manifesting into good, better things coming?
That's a tough one for me to answer, in that I don't actually have his written job description, what he should be doing. But I had the experience of working with Todd Odit, and I think a little bit of it is reinvesting in someone who has a, you know, I know John didn't come into this role with a ton of experience in this realm. I would want to perhaps invest in anyone in this town to get them some sort of leadership training or additional training to help make them better. And I think that's just one of the things I've always wanted to do, no matter what part of business I would be in. But in terms of a town manager, again, what are the dictates by the state of Vermont and League of Towns and Cities in terms of what the difference between the two is? It could just be viewed as a title, but I think that there's probably more to it, where the town manager actually has more authority and more oversight and appropriate.
Yeah, I was just curious, as that being one of your answers, I was just wondering, you know, because I've certainly heard all the, well, not all, I'm sure I haven't heard all the arguments. I've heard a lot of them. I've personally looked up the difference between the two a couple times, get a little lost in the, okay, so he can sign instead of us. All right, I guess that saves, so I was just curious. I ask a lot of people this question because I'm
Yeah, no,
curious.
it's fair. And I will admit that over the past few weeks, I've been kind of loose polling people that I talk to in town. I ask them if they live in town and what their concerns are. And, some of these things do come up and other of these things don't come up. I happened to bring my mom to the Snowflake, to the old mill today, the museum. And of course, I ended up speaking to, I think her name is Linda from the school board, library board. And then
Oh, yeah.
there was no shortage of ideas there.
That's right.
Thank you.
You're done?
So I got.
Wayne?
Thanks, Eric.
I wanted to talk a little bit about your thoughts through your answers here, again, about increasing capacity of the town government. It was interesting to hear you just a second ago say town's been indecisive. I think instead there's been a sea change over the last 5 years about the expectations for what should be happening in the town of Jericho. And we, as town government, are well behind that emerging expectation. Town manager, Eric just mentioned, any other things, what would you see as helping to increase the capacity of town government? One of the things, just what brought to mind is there's somebody who lives in town who's quite a vocal critic of some of the ways that highways and new developments are dealt with. And it's, at first blush, it seems like it's a complaint against the government, the local government, until you realize there really isn't the capacity to monitor the regulations that we have promulgated here at the local level. And so again, begs the question of government capacity. So do you have any ideas about how that might be improved?
To your point, Wayne, and thank you for the question. To your point, I look at it as we actually have a really good government. It's just that it's almost too small. There has been a sea change where what we have in place now is functional and it functions at a very high level. In fact, it probably overclocks, but it still seems to not be able to meet the demands, and you guys end up being a punching bag more often than not. And it's not because you've done anything, it's because you can't do anything or you can't keep up with the demands and the requests. And I think that there is a philosophical shift that can happen as well within the government, where we off gas some of that pressure. We bring it back around to no longer it being not hostile, but where it's one person versus this person, and just say, hey, look, we don't have to respond when someone sends us 18 emails in a week. There's no obligation. There's no law that says we have to respond or we have to absorb that and we have to read through all of these chapters of this copious verbiage. Let's just calm it down. Let's just say, hey, look, we heard you. We'll get to you. We've got 2,500 voters in this town, and yet I'd say probably 90% of the volume is coming from maybe a dozen people, and that's unfair to the rest of the town. And it's something that beats you up. It cheats out most of the town, and it leaves these same people emboldened to keep doing it. And that's obviously that's a hard nut to crack, but it's definitely something that needs to be figured out, even if we got to bring in some sort of a therapist to have a group session for the government. But you guys, I do not envy some of the heat you guys take. I don't think it's justified. So yeah, we look around and a lot of things have happened in the last 5 years, Wayne, in this country, and it's just it's trickled down, and Jericho is no island. We're facing the same problems from different directions as the rest of the nation.
I have one other quick question, and then Catherine probably has, I'm sure has a couple, but about, you have a background in, water quality, I guess I'll just leave it in that term.
Yeah, sure.
What's your take about, some of the suggestions that Jericho should be embarking on some major water infrastructure what are your general thoughts about that?
So it's twofold. One is I know how it can be resolved, and it can be resolved equitably, and it can be resolved with newer technologies and newer approaches and newer programs that are made available to us. But one of the things that I'm seeing, and this is the other component, is that I keep hearing that this person might be working on water, or that person might be working on water, and it's going to take a dedicated team. And I don't know how that would work. I don't want to remove it from planning, because planning's vital, but so is Conservation Commission. And so is the ability to move a little more adeptly and to concentrate a lot of knowledge. And then I had a late night fever dream, as it were, that maybe that's a task force where we actually have the smartest people in this conversation who we have in town, engineers and folks like myself, an ecologist, and we actually do take a look at it, because I believe that we could resolve this in such a way, and I have to be careful. I will divulge it as appropriate, but some of the technology that I have before me is component with a large project I'm working on, and I've been told to kind of lock down the knowledge. It's again, it's related to my partner's work with the Department of Defense, but this water is not really a core component. It's more the technology backing it. So we could put in a distributed model where, instead of just making this huge water treatment plant that everything goes into, we put these small next generation technology units in about 4 places in town. They have very small footprint. They can handle up to 100 gallons per minute, which I believe is 1,200 people in a population zone, and they're the size of a tractor trailer box. And that's actually at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'm having a call with this one specific company to entertain the idea that they're an NSF grant winner, National Science Foundation. They are working with the EPA. They just got one of their first deployments fully vetted. They're looking for partners. And if they're looking for partners and it's EPA backed, that not only brings potential for it to be paid for, but also a novel approach to resolving some of our problems. And we do have a very unique landscape here. It doesn't trend to sending a pipe from one end of town to the other end of town. It's like we have that problem with traffic flow. Imagine what it's like underground.
Thank you.
Oh yes, thank you.
Wow, that was good. Well, actually, I'll kind of flow with what the others have done with it. You've talked about plans, that you'd like to, to facilitate affordable housing and infrastructure, but you feel the town is not currently set up to scale up. So how would you realign the town management to, be able to scale up and do these things?
There are right ways and wrong ways, and I again, I would want input, and there are rules and regs about how that input is acquired and provided. I mean, when you and I had first talked about expanding from 3 to 5 select positions like 3-4 years ago, Kathy, it sounded so easy, and then working with SJ on it and the work that she's put into it, and I realized that, wow, this is way more complicated. So I have a hard time just saying, well, I'm going to do this, when the reality is I need more information to be able to firmly state it. But we have a very motivated small core group of people And I think we should be able to acquire more if we give them a reason to want to. You know, I asked one person a couple of days ago what they thought about Jericho's government, and I got you don't want to be a part of it. It's just a mess. And there was no qualification to that. And then I asked one of the folks at the country store, and she said, one of the young women, and she said, "Oh man, my parents complain about the town government all the time." And I'm like, what's the beef? What exactly is causing such consternation? And I'm wondering if part of it's messaging, part of it is just, you know, it's a volunteer position for the select board and most of the committees. People have other lives, they have families, they have jobs, and they're spread thin. And I think part of it is being able to, going back to some of the noise, be able to actually focus their time effectively instead of chasing after this complaint, that complaint, that complaint. Being able to say, hey, look, you know, time management for those of us that only have X amount of time to give, let's have more people and then we have more time. So that's kind of the idea. And Kathy, with regards to expanding from 3 to 5, I think 3 to 5 also allows us to be able to have more coverage, more availability. Because right now, obviously, the quorum concerns of you either have one or all three, whereas with 5, we could have 2 in the same room at a time, and it wouldn't be a problem. And I think right now that would be beneficial, and it also means that there's less pressure to have a quorum. We could have 4 people or even 3 people at a meeting and be able to make a decision. So I think it's just a matter of balancing the demands, balancing the weighting.
Thank you.
How's that?
Sounds good. Got a few minutes yet.
Okay.
This is a biggie, based on some of the discussion that you had in your thing with, because there are time constraints, but I mean, you could talk about this for a long time. Within the time constraints, what do you envision as the comprehensive infrastructure investments in the next coming years?
That is a big question.
Yeah, in the
Yeah.
next few years.
Yeah, it surely is. So I had brought this to your
No
attention,
space and
Kathy,
stuff.
and I'm sitting on this program until I feel that there's a receivership in the town. The EPA's program would fund basically every aspect of infrastructure, and we could even tack onto it. So I would want to take a fast, hard look at that, because if there are infrastructure items, with the exception of maybe a fire truck, we could get buildings like a new highway department building as part of the oversight. We could get all the stormwater, all of the wastewater, and all of the source water taken care of on one bonding event. And I think that could be the magic bullet. I mean, we're gonna, you know, full well, economically speaking, that the dollar we don't spend today is $10 next year. It's just the nature of things. And that's why, you know, I don't know how, I think probably Wayne and Kathy, you remember back in the 70s when the Clean Water Act was created, and there was a lot of money put out to communities. And a lot of communities utilized the program to build wastewater treatment plants. And those were typically designed by the U.S. Army Corps. Now, there is a wastewater treatment plant in Clinton, Massachusetts on the Nashua River that will never go beyond 40% capacity. It is so massively oversized. But to build that today, they couldn't. They couldn't even build what they need today because of the cost prohibitive nature of these infrastructures. And that's where the sooner we can get something in play, the more cost effective it'll be. Using this program is Treasury Direct. It's the best interest rate we're going to find. I think we'd be able to leverage the tax base of this community and possibly other programs, other EPA grant programs. low end loan is 5 mil, top end loan is 100 mil. We could do a lot in that range. And even as mentioned, we could even like do it with Underhill for that that Route 15 stretch. I think, and that's just scratching the surface. I think that there are a lot of programs that we haven't had either the expertise or the time to look into.
Well, my other questions were answered. Does anybody else have any other questions that they would like answered? Based on,
Other than when you mentioned Clinton, Mass, I wondered if you've ever been to that Museum of Russian Icons. I know I divert, but that place is fabulous anyway. That seems like something you might be interested in, like the biggest exhibit of Orthodox Russian icons in North America.
wow,
Just
I
pretty
have not, but that's awesome.
Anyway, that's just a bird walk that goes nowhere, but.
No, that's fantastic. Hey, I can tell you that
Near Worcester?
what's that? Yeah, it's northeast of Worcester, right off of Route 2.
No, I can't think of any questions. I'm sorry to even just go on that.
oh, but
No,
that's fine.
it's fun. You know, we talk about wastewater treatment plants, and I'm like, hey, MWRA, Mass Water Resources Authority, sources all of their water for Boston area out of the Quabbin Reservoir, and the pipes from the Quabbin to Boston, in some places are still made of wood from the colonial times. It literally leaks 1 million gallons of potable water a day from the Quabbin to Boston. And then I've been in one of the output channels of I think it was Deer Isle. There are two water treatment facilities for Boston. You could drive 2 semi trucks side by side through those outflow pipes into Boston Harbor. Yeesh.
Well, we had extra time with Sarah as well, so we asked her, why don't you, for the record, talk a little bit more about yourself and your interest in things like that, so that the public knows a bit more about yourself.
Sure, glad to. I will admit I am from New Hampshire, and my
Wait a
dad
minute, this interview's over.
my dad was from Claremont though, so at least he could see Vermont. But I'm a 1990 UVM grad, and my wife talked me into coming back to Vermont from New Hampshire. She was a coffee attorney. Now she's a soda attorney. She's with Keurig Dr. Pepper, and she handles all that happy stuff. My own self, I use the title systems ecologist because, quite frankly, that doesn't exist anywhere in the world, but I'm one of a very small group of people that integrates quantum theory into ecological approaches and systems design. I have 2 primary projects. One of them has its own legs, and it's kind of, I'm keeping it on the side. That one is natural fiber applications, and most people think, oh, fibers, yeah, I have a hemp t-shirt, but the reality is the customer base for my partner's business includes Fiat Chrysler, Polestar. They just signed a deal with B Comp, which is a carbon negative source. They supply resins to Shell Oil. They do make textiles, Patagonia, North Face, Brookhaven sheets, but that's his gig. The other project is massive. I think we just scoped out that the startup funds are going to be $2 billion to get it up and rolling. I am probably going to need a location in Vermont where I'm going to need 20 to 40 acres of ag land. I haven't set myself on where that would be, but it will effectively be a research facility, focusing on effectively being part of a hub and spoke arrangement. It's a disambiguation of resources. So instead of using, say, 1,000 acres for a farm, we use 10 different locations with 40 acres each. And I know that math doesn't equate, But if we can use that land more efficiently and more effectively, then we're actually creating a failover and we're hardening the system so that if for whatever reason one crop fails, we've got the other crops. Whereas one farm fails with 1,000 acres or 10,000 acres, you've lost all your crop. So, I mean, I'm using generalities and simple terms, but we're talking with the top of the food chain people, and as I had mentioned, Department of Defense is kind of probably even monitoring this. If you want to say hi to anyone. So that's what I do in terms of my health. As I've said before, it's maudlin talking about my health, but I did have a significant scare. I am still on the transplant list. I might get pulled off in the spring. Chronic Lyme disease went after every system in my body. And when I found a way to kill the Lyme, it does something called Jarisch-Herxheimer response. Herxing releases toxins into your body. When I killed the Lyme, the toxins did my liver in and my liver failed. And I have had 28 procedures, including a shunt that bypasses my liver. But my MELD score, model of end-stage liver disease, has gone from 28 down to 8. You normal people are a 6. So I'm literally back to normal, but with a shunt.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
thank you.
There's a bunch of stuff.
Have a good evening then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joel.
Thanks, Joel.
Thank you all, and thank you for the
Thank you.
opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I went off on that. I just.
Oh, that sounds fun though. I mean, those Russian icons are just really
You don't
fascinating.
even have to be religious. These things will just knock you on your rear end when you look at them.
Well, and you
They're
can,
so powerful.
yeah, and you can see why so much gold leaf was used because, you put the candles there and it just reflects so interestingly.
Yeah, anyway, you and Bill should go down there one time. You really like it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, at the moment we may have, I mean, there's no dog, there's no cats. I mean,
Oh, that's right.
it's,
You've got
sad.
a window.
Sad, but yeah, you're right. It's a window because once I get beyond this and be able to get down and clean litter boxes again. I will be looking for kitty siblings.
Was Joe in the wings?
We'll see him.
Joe, I believe, is planning on being here in person.
Oh,
He
okay.
knows his time.
He does.
How many people came the other night, Jessica, to that street naming road thing?
About 20 in the, probably 20 in the room and 10 on Zoom.
That's
Oh,
great.
Good.
Recorded, and actually they were just working on getting in photos, so it should come out soon.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's great because Bill and I were going to watch it. We were going to zoom
I
in.
think they're still editing.
Yeah, Bill and I were going to zoom in and then something came up that we couldn't. So I'm glad that that I had remembered it was going to be recorded because that is interesting because we did the very first one with the names and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening,
Hi.
Joe.
Prompt.
You're dressed for the weather.
I've got to work.
Arrived at 7:59.
Well, that's right. You've gone first. Eric's gone first. It's my turn to go first then.
That's right.
Basically what we've done, because we've allocated this 30 minutes, and it turns out our questions don't take 30 minutes, but it gives you then the opportunity at the end to talk a little bit more about yourself or what you'd like the public to know, so that, they knew more about you if and when you run, a town meeting. But what we've done is each one of us gets 10 minutes and we are rotating who gets to go first, because it turns out there's a lot of questions that are similar. So people at the end are scrambling, okay, did I write enough extra questions to cover my slot? Well, what I found fascinating is, because I have a background in science, and you approach the questions as a data-driven background would suggest.
Yeah.
So, you talked about opportunities that you do you see that it can be corrected with thoughts about the funding, you had mentioned one of your things, so can you want to talk about that a bit?
Well, again, as I mentioned in my questions, I've always been a very fiscal responsible person. I try to pay attention to what's down the road, what I have to deal with, what's coming up. So I try to plan that way. But I guess a little more clarity is what I would like to get from you, Catherine, is you're referring to like increasing money within town to do things for infrastructure?
Sure.
Okay, well, fine. Actually, some things to consider, especially when we come to infrastructure, is how my clients would hate me to say this, but impact fees. Jericho basically doesn't do any impact fees in planning and zoning. But that's a wonderful way to look for your future, as long as your future is designated. So when you talk about impact fees for trails, well, does the town have designated areas where there are hotspots? If they are, and any development that occurs along that hotspot, you designate trail, you want a road here, then you look at doing impact fees. And that impact fee doesn't necessarily mean that you have to build it at that time, but it goes into an escrow / kitty for when that ability occurs. Again, we're a small town. Usually impact fees are large towns, but again, as we grow and we become more of an outlier community for Burlington, for Essex, for Colchester, those are things to consider to help alleviate some of those costs if that's the direction the town wants to go with. Other than that, because we're fairly limited in business, it's kind of hard to look at anything else. Except grand list and a percentage increase in the grand list.
Yeah, the discussion that coming up that they may be in the legislature about, adding the municipal extra sales tax to every town, giving each town the opportunity to do so. It doesn't do much for this town.
Yeah, because again, Jericho's development, or where it is now, is partially a product of its zoning rights, but also development of where it sits again geographically. We don't have direct hookup to a major artery right off. Our nearest one is 15, and then the connection is 127 or 117 with other town roads. So it puts us at somewhat a disadvantage to see a development business wise.
Yeah, that's good. Well, continuing on that, talking about affordability and infrastructure, you made a comment that the town needs to create pathways and opportunities that continue the need for diversity and affordability in housing. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I guess I can. As I highlighted, I think in the question too, there's direct and indirect paths to that.
Yeah.
And how the town wants to proceed with that, that's kind of dependent upon, I would say, what the residents want. Again, I outlined both paths and so on. I believe there's a need for affordable housing. I really do. But typically with affordable housing, you have certain anemones that have to go close to it. All right. Bus routes are prime. You have stores that are supposed to be close to it. So once you look at our town makeup and where we are with that, it's kind of difficult, because where those are, we already have cluster development with typically small town lots with limited capacity for growth. And we can zone this. We can create zoning for that, and other zoning and write the regulations to increase density. But again, it goes back to the center. So in order for us the town to take part in this, again, it goes back to the nuts and bolts. Where can we put it? And if we can put it there, then let's make some robust zoning and give the DRB the tools to be able to allow it to happen.
Good. Because the public doesn't have an understanding of what you were talking about, direct and indirect. So, could you expand on that for the record then, so the public know what you're talking about?
Sure. So a direct path would be for, again, as we recently saw in town of Jericho, they purchased a piece of land. They openly said, we would like to see what we can do with this to bring affordable housing to Jericho. So they purchased this apartment. I applaud the effort. I think that's a step in the right direction, but that's a direct path. Okay, you're making something directly happen. Indirect would be for the same thing as saying that parcel comes up for sale is seeing if there's criteria that you can set in that parcel that allow for denser housing forward. So it makes it very attractive to the local private developer. So let's say that zoning comes up. You know, Williston has capacity to it's called like spot zoning. Okay, we can look at spot zoning to make it attractive to come in. So let's say the normal density on that is half acre. Well, can we do quarter acre? Can we make it attractive? Developers see one thing, unfortunately, it's their return. And they don't bite unless there's a return. So there's options to make that work for the private individual to bring the benefits.
How does being on the select board help further that?
Well, there's some guidance that you can operate. I mean, let's face it, the select board helps appoint the people on the DRB and the planning commission. You know, during the interview, what are your thoughts on it? You know, let's face it, if you're interviewing someone for the planning commission and they first thing they open up and say, I like Jericho nice and small the way it is, I don't want any change. Well, you consider that. Is that where we want to go? And it may be, but you know, those are the oversight people that have that guidance to maybe direct us in a path a little bit.
Okay, I'll pass my time on to, let's see, I guess it's Eric.
So you're kind of right where this question lands anyway, where you've been talking about. So the more I get experience in this role, there are two needs that I hear from basically all the citizens. They land on one side or the other, but they all kind of agree with both to some extent. How do you balance the need to grow with the majority of the residents who want to see Jericho stay rural? So those people you were just talking about, right? They want to see it stay small. They don't want a house in their backyard. They don't want to see, we don't want to turn into Taft Corners, Williston. But we are going to be, if we don't get more kids in the school, none of us are gonna be able to afford to live here, right? You know, so how do you balance those two, what are frequently feel like opposing forces, right?
Boy, Eric, that's a tough one.
Yeah, no kidding.
It really is.
Eric got to go a good one.
Yeah.
Sorry, and I mean, and I don't expect you, I don't expect anyone to have the answer to that, but I mean, that's almost all of the things that come in front of us that
That's what it
they're
is.
coming on one side or the other, you know?
You know, the wants and needs of people need to be heard. Okay. So there's no doubt you're going to have a certain amount of conflict in certain situations. Again, if someone buys a house in the village, there's a reason they bought it in the village. That's what they want. That's what they want to see. Okay, that's what they're used to. If someone buys a house in the country, that's what they want. That's what they're used to seeing. It's when we try to jam the two together, I think we run into problems. It's when you have, let's say, large 5-acre lots, and someone next door wants to put in 1 acre or quarter-acre lots, and you have this I'm not saying compliance, because I don't like that word. You have this situation that you created that's not congruent to what's there. It's outside of it. So, I mean, the best effort we can do is to look when we grow and we have these situations between what certain people want. You look at the situation where they're at, how they perceive their enjoyment, and do your best to work within those confines. All right. To, you know, what's the instance of boy, this is tough one. How do I come up with that situation? well, let's say Packard Road. Let's say we try to take Packard Road and all of a sudden, for some reason, we want more density and we're gonna create, Packard Road's also gonna become a town center. You know, up at the four corners with Orr Road Extension, Packard Road. Now we really want to pack that in and so on. Of course, we're gonna have problems there. Of course, there's gonna be issues. People are gonna argue about it. So I think by being perceptive of what is existing and what makes people happy, you know, and trying to honor that, I think is where we're gonna try to keep our growth if we want it. But also not exceed the confines of those people's enjoyment in that area. I guess that's my area.
Do you think the village, so I mean, you're saying you move into a village, you expect to be surrounded by other houses. Do you think our villages can support the growth we need? I'm on a roll now. Fine.
Yeah, you are.
I just gotta add that back. It depends on what is there for soils, for water, for sewer, for gas, for lights, you know? Some people like having a street light in front of them. Some people don't.
That's true.
You know, so that I would love to see some nice density increase. I'd love to see part of Jericho have the commercial zone, something like Woodstock. Drive to Woodstock commercial area is beautiful.
Oh, that's
Really, they've
gorgeous.
done a wonderful job, but that's been a lot of foresight and a lot of money that created that. Can we do that? I think it's possible. You know, the Flats is a gorgeous area. We I think made a little step towards it by looking at form-based code. But again, it's kind of difficult because we don't see growth in large numbers. We don't, no one comes to Jericho and in the Flats and wants to do 50 units. It's not where we are yet.
Mhm.
So. Can I answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't give you a great yes or no
Well,
questions,
no,
right?
well, that's the idea though.
Yeah,
Well, and you also have to take into account that the state is changing the regulations because they do want more density in certain areas, and they're talking with the study of S100 right now to expand maybe like village centers to villages because they need to move like a lot of towns out of the floodplain where they are to, you know, but you got to move the growth and you got to move the infrastructure with it. But you also have to balance the laws that put aside 30% of the land by 2030 and 50% of it by 2050.
It's tough to balance, you're absolutely right. It's tough to balance both those principles and achieve your goals.
Yeah.
You know, especially when you have the energy, the push for energy, you know, for so much Vermont to be
Yeah.
set aside for renewable energy. How does a town manage accomplishing that with density and open land? Unless you can combine the solar fields with the open land, it's hard to meet all that.
Mhm. It really is.
so what would you try to do first? So you got on the board, let's say hypothetically you decided to run and won again, so you're on for a year and what, 4 months,
Yeah.
you know, anyway, like what would be something that you'd try to do?
Well, the first couple months, I'm just gonna listen.
How unique.
It's gonna take more than a couple months.
I don't even listen to, my wife tells me I don't listen enough anyway, so.
Uh-oh.
What would I try to accomplish? I guess finding continuity between development infrastructure and the town's needs and affording it. I guess that's what I would say I would concentrate, or I'd like to concentrate or have an impact on it, is combining those two.
Great.
I'm really glad you mentioned that because I made a point in my little blip saying I couldn't continue any longer about the need for spade in the ground infrastructure projects are overdue. And it seems like the couple of things that really have to happen is we've got to step up to the plate and identify which one infrastructure project we're going to do. Probably requires bonding. The other is an increase in affordable housing. You talked about that a little bit. And the other is generally increasing the capacity of town government to meet the expectations for all the regulations that we have. So your background, particularly as a surveyor and knowing how development works, really seems well suited to DRB. How do you think that background serving on the select board?
Well, as I touched upon in one of the questions is the patience to listen, to review the information presented to you and make decisions based upon regulations, criteria, public input. The DRB is a quasi-judicial board. I mean, we have a certain regulations we have to stand by. Select board has certain regulations they have to run by: town meeting, the bylaws, and the town charter. I mean, you have criteria you have to follow to protect the town and the inhabitants, and also the entity itself. So, understanding how all that works and having the patience and knowledge to convey that to the community is highly important. I think Catherine touched upon it. Most people do not understand how the process works. I remember reading this was quite a few years ago. I don't know if it was Front Porch Forum or something, but Dollar General came to Jericho. And someone made the comment that, how could this happen? This is a direct result of not going to town meeting. And when I read that, it became very clear that this person has no idea how the process works, how it's set up, and the diligence and the overview and all the parties involved. So understanding how the town works, how the laws work, is paramount. I mean, having and making sure that the residents know that, because most don't.
I really appreciate you saying that. As somebody who spent 40 years in public service, many people have the impression that the decisions made by a public body are arbitrary and capricious, and you just got to get there. And if you influence the outcome, they'll vote your way, rather than they're following all these regulations, which are really limiting some of their options. So it sounds like you've got that demeanor in mind. I wanted to follow up on a question about, you talked about capacity, limited business in town, so, it doesn't affect the grand list. And I'm wondering about this wild notion of increased commercial activity right near 89 interchange. Jericho is within almost a stone's throw of that intersection. And it's been suggested in the past, to no effect, but it's been suggested in the past that if there was some little nodule down right at the end of Jericho, right near the interstate, that was sort of tailored to commercial, we'd be able to pull in some tax money as a result of that. What would be your take on that wild notion?
Well, again, the possibilities there, but again, you've got the railroad in there, you got the interstate, you got Route 7, you also have a floodplain all throughout there too. Now, if the pocket's there and we can facilitate certain regulations that would make it more viable, yeah, I think it's fine. But it has to be looked at. Again, I always refer back, let's look at all that, let's put all that information together at the table. Maybe we have a planning department, put some stuff together, and take a look. It's definitely a possibility. It definitely is. But again, I think once you have all that criteria, I'll kick back to the floodplain. I remember driving through there, a lot of big rains. There's a good section of that that's underwater.
Yeah.
So
You do in-ground pools right there.
That's right. Just get your car out of there after we get 2 inches of rain. Well, yeah, to say something's not possible without looking at it is just a poor effort, a lazy effort. It really is. So yeah, if the information provides sufficient, yeah, as long as I will say, I can say this, am I pro-development? Yes. But also I'm pro-development that protects the public. I'm a firm believer in stormwater rules, wastewater rules, zoning regulations and so on to protect the public. The only reason we have all these is because one person harmed another. And we have to have those in place. So I am pro-development, but it has to meet the criteria we have in place to protect the public.
I have one last question. You've been around Chittenden County and even Franklin County, marvel at the number of affordable housing units that seem to be built in towns, really no different size than us, Fairfax or Fairfield. I still get the two of them mixed up after 40 years. Heinsberg, you know, the list goes on. What's the difference? Why has Jericho been so moribund? Just nothing really going on as far as focused development. We've got plenty of big McMansions, $800,000 that all look the same as the next one.
You're missing my house.
But what do you think is the difference that town government should be paying attention to that distinguishes it from a Heinsberg and a Fairfax and you know, not Colchester? We're never going to be Williston. I think that's a false analogy that people,
Oh, it
well, we're
is.
going to turn into Williston. No, we're not going to turn into Williston
No,
because we don't have a table-sized flat area of land right next to an interchange, a whole bunch of reasons.
We don't have a connection municipal sewer, we don't have a connection, direct connection to interstate, so on.
And-
You're absolutely
So
right.
that would be where you
Yeah.
would say the distinction is between a Heinsberg and a Jericho.
Yes.
the other thing is we have three separate centers as opposed to one district, like Heinsberg or Richmond or any of those.
Yeah.
We have three separate entities that are all
That's true.
unique to themselves.
Yes.
Yes. So the trouble is, and they're far enough apart where the connection is difficult. We're talking 2-3 miles at least between every one of them, so
It's probably $1 million or more a mile. Don't do anything.
I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that. But why aren't we there? I just don't think we've had the need to get there yet. No, I think the need for that has not existed in Jericho till probably now.
Yeah.
We're reaching that. So you're seeing the growth of I've seen a substantial amount of growth in my 32 years of being on Route 15. Unless I leave for work, well, I do leave for work. I leave for work between 4 and 6:30 every day in the morning. I have no trouble getting out. My wife, on the other hand, thanks God the light came in, because trying to leave it between 7:30 and 8:30 without that light, it's a racetrack. So Jericho hasn't seen the need yet. I think we're there. So the time to bring these considerations is kind of on our doorstep, and how we decide to move forward is going to be, you know, a joint effort between the select board, the DRB, the planning commission, and the rest of it.
Okay, thank you.
If you get up at 4:30 in the morning, are you aware sometimes how late the select board?
That's a good question.
'Cause it's 5 of 11 once in a while. That'd be.
It is rarely before 10.
Oh, yeah, Eric will tell you how he thought he got lied to.
Well, I thought I had this brilliant thing like that second year or whatever, like, let's move it to 6:30.
Yeah.
We'll get out early. And we didn't, we don't get out any earlier. I don't know what would happen if we moved it to 6. We'd probably just,
The select board's a commitment.
Yeah.
You know, we've had 2 planning commission meetings that go pretty late, deliberating too. And I've said, I've done enough planning commission meetings in South Burlington and Williston where they have 7, 8 things on the agenda. We're still there at 10. So yes, I understand it's considerable effort. I would not ask to be considered if I did not have that premise.
that wasn't a super serious question. I was just picking on you for getting up at 4:30.
You know, there's no sense of half participating. I don't plan on that.
Yeah. Well, we have a few more minutes of your time. Do you have anything you want to talk about yourself or your interests that, you know, that would be interesting to the public, since you're, you know, a little more of these things. We've learned all kinds of other things about people. And they're,
Absolutely, Catherine. I'm a fairly simple, hardworking guy who really enjoys the community. I wasn't raised here. I'm from upstate New York, very rural upstate New York. We moved here. But this is our home. we recently got a hold of Bertland home. We will be buried in the Jericho Center Cemetery.
Wow.
This is our home. If I could fit in the Castle Cemetery, I would, but there's no room, and the reason I want to be there is the guy who built my house is there.
Aw,
I can stand on the grave who built my house and see the house still.
that is really good history.
That's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. Dollar General didn't block my view.
Transplanted.
Yeah, I am a flatlander.
You from Western New York?
No, so Malone, New York.
Oh,
Oh,
okay,
alone.
way up there, yeah.
Yeah, half our farm is in Canada.
Wow.
So when I say upstate, I'm upstate. This was moving. I loved it when I moved here because I got called a flatlander and from the city, and we dressed up to go to Plattsburgh. That was a big deal.
After high school, I moved out. My uncle bought a farm in a town called Madrid, not Madrid. Madrid, which is right,
Soccer.
yeah, right near, so I went out and worked with him for about 18 months out there. So I know the country.
Madrid, Washington.
Yeah, absolutely.
We played them in soccer, yeah.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate that.
Time, consideration.
Thank you.
Thank
Yep.
you. It's not going to be easy.
I always think of upstate is out near where I was born. There's a whole other section.
Oh, yeah.
I know, I think
That's right.
they tend to call it the North Country,
North
is what I
Country, yeah.
found.
Right.
Yeah, they don't, upstate, I think you're right, mean more like
Rochester.
Yeah.
Something that,
Right, exactly. Rochester, up through up
Buffalo.
Watertown,
well, yeah,
because that's upstate too.
Mr. Booth.
Moose Booth.
I think you're here.
Yes. He's the man of the hour, so to speak. Well, Peter, you're pretty close on time. In fact, as you're early, but we're moving along. And-
30, right?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
But it's
8:29.
Okay.
yeah, it's just 8:29, so. They fixed the clock for me. But so what we're doing is this like we each have our different questions based on your interview,
Yep.
and we've been taking turns. Each one of us gets 10 minutes. We found out that typically we have not used it all, and at the end, so we ask you to talk a little bit about yourself or anything interesting that you'd like the public to know about you that maybe they don't, or whatever, kind of
Okay.
just something fun like that. And we've circled around, and it's Wayne's turn to start again.
Oh, okay. So I'll just pick up on a couple of the notes I was intrigued about some of your comments about helping manage and expedite decisions with a mixed crowd. A crowd that may have difficulty with decisions that the select board is about to make, or are disruptive or abusive during the meeting, although we haven't anything really egregious at any of these meetings. Nothing that required the police or anything.
No, like
So
so.
just wonder what your thoughts are about how much, well, you've done a lot of work in public committees of the town. Tell us a little bit about any experiences you've had where town was deliberating on its work and the dynamics of those in attendance and sort of leaning on the select board. How would you
that,
deal with some
I
of that?
haven't really had any experience in town committees with that, but that happened not infrequently on school boards. I was on the ID school board back in like the late 90s, I think, and MMU school board as well. And there was a sort of a group of people back then who were really, really fired up about school spending. This is all before Act 60. And enough, I think it was called Enough is Enough was the name of the group. And they were sending out a lot of postcards about town meeting, about school budgets and rallying folks to kind of show up and vote down budgets. And we had some hot meetings, really, hotly contested meetings where lots of people in the audience were really unhappy with the ID board at that time. And it was a long time ago, so many years ago, but, and I don't have great memories, you know, my affect is always. My approach is always sort of like, listen, I'm just the guy who happens to be on that side of the table. I mean, we're all just citizens of this town who need to work together and figure out how we're gonna move forward. I happen to be the one who's one of the people who are making the decisions about what the school budget is gonna be, or what we're gonna ask, you know, what we're gonna be advocating for, or which often it came to positions. The ID school was so small that we'd gain 10 kids, and all of a sudden that means that we had to hire a teacher, and so the budget was sort of erratic.
Right, sure, yeah.
And so my approach has always been just to try to have an honest, genuine conversation, and when things turn abusive, to sort of, or not abusive is a strong word, but sort of when I start feeling like I or the board is sort of being attacked as if we were sort of out to do something, or trying to wrong some group in some way. My tendency is to sort of say like, hold on a second, let's take a step back, because this is not productive to be talking this way. And honestly, I'm not going to let you talk to me that way. You know, and I remember vividly, I can't think of what his name was. But I remember we were either letting a nurse go or hiring a nurse, and that was a really hot point. And I was having trouble sleeping because it was such a hard decision about the money of the cost of a nurse versus, I think it was about having a nurse in the building all the time versus sharing a nurse maybe with Browns River. And I'm right, I remember vividly, I said, I've been staying up at night thinking about this, like waking up at 2 a.m, stressing about this decision. And I remember this person who was sort of the head of the Enough is Enough group, rolled his eyes. And I said, listen, you can roll your eyes, but I'm being genuine and honest here. This is stuff that is keeping me up. I feel a real obligation to both the students and the teachers in this building and the people who are paying the bills. And this is not easy for me. You might think this is all just me not really listening to what you're saying, but I am listening to what you're saying. I do hear what you're saying. And this is hard. This is a hard situation that I'm trying to do my best with. So I've found that can sort of diffuse the situation. And I think it's important to be really clear about what's okay and what's not okay. I don't think things have gotten sort of heated and sort of dangerous, which they have, I don't think here, but they have throughout Vermont for sure. And I'm glad that we haven't gotten to that point. But I think that there have been times when people have been have sort of got on a soapbox and sort of talked at you and sort of gone on at length the way I am now. And not
Well, you
really-
haven't said the phrase "you people" yet.
But when people, I feel like, and I would want to talk to the remaining members of the board about sort of what the policy has been and why, about what, if there's time limits to having people speaking, or just sort of how that has been managed, because it's just not productive for the select board when in a meeting someone is making a 7-minute speech about how upset they are, or why their idea is good and your idea is stupid.
Good answer.
Yeah, that is. Could you talk a little bit about increasing, what your thoughts are about increasing the capacity of town government to meet the more recently stated needs for affordable housing or highway specs, whatever those things
Yeah.
are.
I can't mean, and I said this in the question and answer thing that I sent you, I don't really have a strong opinion about the town manager versus town administrator. Honestly, I don't really know. My very basic understanding is the town manager has more ability to sort of do some stuff that doesn't need to bring a document to you and say, please sign this. They can just sign it. They've been kind of deputized to do that. I view that as, and this is a little awkward with John sitting here, but sort of there's kind of two ways to think about that, or two things to consider in that. One is sort of delete all the people in the room right now and just think about Jericho, where we're at right now.
Sure.
What do we need? Do we need a town manager or a town administrator? And then make that decision. Then you put us all back in the room, and now, from my perspective as an outsider, like the obvious move, I would think that John's assumption would be that he would be either offered the job or asked to apply for the job. And is John, do we as a town want John as a town manager right now? And I have literally zero opinion about that, because I have never met John before. So there's the immediate, what would it mean to make John Abbott the town manager? How is that going to move the town forward or not? And then on top of that, sort of the more, where is Jericho as a community with of this size, with these needs? Do we need a town manager? Kind of at a more theoretical level.
I appreciate you making that distinction, and I'll just stick my neck out a little bit, that you've got to separate those issues. If changes in government amount to sort of an approval, a plebiscite, if you will, over how so-and-so is doing, you've skewered the whole conversation about what we should be doing in the future.
Right.
Is this about John? No, this is not about John. It's not about Catherine. It's not about Eric or Wayne. It's about, what does town government look like a couple of years from now? That's going to be really hard to manage that, because people are going to want to weigh in on what a crappy job, blah, 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 and then you're not talking about the issue, which is what we want to build in the future. So I really appreciate you saying that. But the whole notion of, I'll just say very quickly, because there is this notion called policy governance, which people can start snoring right now. But when you have a town manager who's empowered to do things, the role of the select board becomes more circumscribed, and it gets more relegated to policy, maintaining policy, and
Like a
looking at.
school board.
Yeah.
School board deputize the superintendent, and all they do is write policy, and the superintendent implements it.
Right, and then you evaluate the superintendent on their ability
Their
to deliver on the,
Right.
exactly, that's the whole thing in a nutshell. People spend master's degrees on the whole thing. That's really what it boils down to. And I think that's what's ahead. And this isn't about my opinion about those things. I just was really intrigued that you were able to separate the issue of town manager from who's doing that job right now. You can't mix those. You don't make a good decision. And then so on the matter of increasing the select board or not, that's not a criteria about whether people are going to be selected, but you had mentioned it.
Yeah, I think, right now we are in a pretty remarkable time in terms of state and federal funding for Jericho's needs. And to my mind, and I don't know a lot, I don't know open meeting law really, really well. My understanding is that the way it's been run here for years is that no two of you can talk about town matters outside of these meetings. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but that's how it's played out. And to me, that is hamstringing the select board to, I can't think of a drastic word, but to a really significant degree, where you're unable to do any work or have any conversations about the town other than 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or hours twice a month. That just seems like there's no way for the select board to not be back on its heels at all times, where everything is coming at you and it builds for 2 weeks and then you're reacting to it. And I view it as and then you're patching holes and figuring it out, and then now 2 weeks later we'll do it again. And there's no ability for sort of vision or discussions or for Catherine and Wayne to go and talk about using the ARPA funds or have a meeting, 2 people have a meeting and with the Affordable Housing Committee and talk about what their thinking are, and then you guys take that information away and kind of talk and then bring it back to the group and say, hey, we talk with them, here's what it's feeling like, this feels like a direction we should be heading in. What do people think about that? It just feels like, and even to the point of, hey, I'd love to talk, Eric, about the last meeting. I felt like you were really upset about the conversation that we had, and should we be talking about how Peter Booth conducts himself at meetings, because it seemed like you really just the ability to do work offline that isn't, and this isn't, this is the open meeting law piece that isn't sort of in front of the public, where you know, Catherine can't turn to Wayne and say, Wayne, I feel like you're mad at me right now about this thing or whatever. And there's, without it being a public conversation. And
Right.
I get the reasoning for open meeting law 100%, and I'm obviously completely in support of it. But I think that the town has gotten to a side that has enough issues and what big sort of maybe monumental, too big a word, but important issues in front of it that the board, I think, is really hamstrung by an inability to do any work outside of these meetings periodically. You know, relatively infrequent. They're not infrequent, but probably feeling very frequent. You guys.
Okay, thank you.
Are you done?
I'm done.
Your turn.
So I asked this question to the last person, so I'm just gonna ask the same one because it was a good one. So I've been here almost 3 years. And to boil down kind of the two forces of town, there's residents who want Jericho to stay rural, stay the way it is, and then there is the need to grow. Like really two very opposed and very strong feelings on both sides. And to me, that's what the next 5-10 years is going to be like here. And so, you know, how do we balance that? You know, how do we get the growth that we need to keep our schools populated without building everywhere and having everyone not feel that they live in a rural town that they want to live in?
I don't have an answer to that. That is the exact same conversation that was going on when we moved here 30 years ago. Like, you know, and my wife is among the people who wants everything to stay exactly the way it is and not change anything at all. And I've said to her, I said, yeah, but you don't own that land, so you don't get to tell people what they're going to do with it. Now you do to some extent with planning and zoning and stuff. But land is owned, and it's my belief that it's going to be developed one way or another. It's going to be developed as, you know, as Burlington just creeps farther out and housing gets more scarce and people start moving farther and farther out to try to find housing. Not that we're affordable at all, but that land's going to be developed. And so my perspective is that the town should be involved in how it's developed as much to the, you know, to whatever extent is reasonable around, you know, homeowners' right or landowners' rights and such. That's a real tension. And the other related to that, I think, is that we are a town that I'm guessing many of us in this room could not buy into this town today. I mean, I bought my house in 1992 for $98,000. And my house is not, but I also burned to the ground, but the original version was $98,000. And which you literally can't get a trailer in Jericho for that amount of money. And I think that's a huge problem for our town, not just because it's like the right thing to do and we need to provide housing for all and all that stuff. I think it's a huge problem that we're just going to end up with a whole bunch of old, and I'll include myself in this, you know, it's not really true, like a bunch of old sort of pretty affluent people who are pretty fine. And we're going to be a very old, very generic, very not, in my opinion, good place to live. I feel like I've gotten off your question a little.
No, yeah, but you're perfectly there. So what do we do? Like, what do you think the town needs to do so that doesn't happen?
It's hard.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. I think that that facility, I think that, I don't know. I imagine that we're too small a town to be able to like start an affordable housing fund or a trust. But if we were to couple with surrounding towns like Jericho, Underhill, Richmond, to try to create some kind of a fund that is supporting affordable housing in this area, I think that probably in general, Underhill and Richmond are similar to us in terms of their population being fairly affluent and their housing being fairly unattainable for young people at our college or, you know, people right in the workforce. So that seems like an approach would be to create like a consortium of towns to try to pool resources to create some affordable housing in the area. I know that some people are not in support of this and would say the town should not be in the developing business. But I do think that back when I was on the planning commission, I think was when that Rivers property came up and that you know, that was all going down. And at that time, there was talk about Plains Road having quarter-acre zoning, and there was discussion about the town. Don Foote, I think, was one of the big kind of proponents, was the town should take that land and the town should develop it or create is there a development corp that the towns?
That's the JCDC, yeah.
Yeah, the JCDC should take that on and develop that land in that quarter-acre zoning and develop that affordable housing for there. So I think that's appropriate. Some of you may disagree, and certainly people in the town might disagree. But I'm not opposed to that sort of direct action.
Thank you. I'll pass it to Catherine.
Oh. Okay.
It's based on time.
Okay. It is interesting. You talk about most of us can't afford to live in the houses we do, you know, certainly couldn't buy it. I agree. I beat you 1 year. We came in 91. But we were here in Shelburne in the 70s. So and then had to go to
We
New
lived in a house in Moretown with no water, which allowed us to not have to pay rent for 3 months, which allowed us to build up enough cash reserve to put a down payment on our house here.
Oh my
Shower.
Oh my God.
Wow.
That's so great.
Romance.
Those are the days.
But it's true. I mean, you're talking about elderly people want to stay in Jericho, but they'd like to downsize. And this is just a comment based on what you're saying, but we can't, there's nothing to downsize to at this moment. I mean, theoretically, that's that mixed.
So Eric's got a barn. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna see if I can rent a stall, one for me and one for my wife, adjoining stalls.
There also would not be water, but
But again, the rent would be very reasonable.
But yeah, I mean, because that's what Riverside is supposed to
Right,
be. Is
right,
that
I
mixed, is mixed, you know, affordable senior, a whole, you know, whether it's connected or
It's
apartments or.
problematic is that form-based code is, I think, that was the vision that I was so excited about when we were.
Exactly.
It was like,
Yeah,
Yeah,
have a bustling, not a downtown,
Yes.
but like
Yes.
an area with like.
were we naive or what? What happened?
I don't know. You people were in charge. You people. There we go.
No, we were all so starry-eyed that this
That's
was
right.
gonna help.
yeah. Well, and it did in other communities because, Winooski did form-based code after we did, and boy, it just exploded. But would I like some of those homes? I don't know. Because they all look like boxes.
That had played out the way we
Yeah.
thought it was gonna play
Uh-huh.
out 10 years ago.
Yeah,
I was so excited that I lived right 2 doors down from
Yeah.
the market, and I was like, this is gonna be amazing. It's gonna be right there. It's gonna be small apartments up top. There's gonna be street stuff on the street, business on the street. It's gonna be awesome. And
It still it still could happen.
Painted a pretty dismal picture of a bunch of old people there.
People with their walker. Just come like this with their walker. across the lot.
Oh, gosh. This has been too fun. All right, several of the questions, you know, I've combined them because they all deal with public engagement, inclusiveness, and the need to serve an increasingly diverse population. How would you, as a select board member, help to make Jericho more welcoming and inclusive?
I mean, I think affordable housing is, I mean, I think the real barrier to us not being a town of relatively affluent white people without disabilities is is affordable housing. That's the primary barrier. You know, I have four kids who are adopted through the DCF system, and three of whom have disabilities, and two of whom still live with us because they have disabilities. And what my wife and I are hoping is that there's a house I'm not going to name since it's probably on the record. I don't want to tip anybody off. There's a house we've been watching in Jericho, waiting for the moment that it goes on the market, because it's falling apart, hoping we can buy it and fix it up and then set up our boys. It's like a half mile from our house, and set them up in a situation where one of them we think will be independent and one will never be independent. Our son, Jesse, they're always driving around town. People all know them better than they know us at this point. But Jesse could live with Aiden sometimes and then come back when they got fired up and he needed the release, come back to us. But the only place we can imagine doing that in town is this house that is slowly kind of sinking into the ground. And there's just no way to there's no way for someone like my son Jesse, who has disabilities and needs lots of support, to live in this town right now without living literally with us. So I think affordable housing is sort of the linchpin, to my mind, of diversifying the town. I mean, you have to have a ridiculous income to enter, or have some connection, have a parent who's got a piece of land that they can subdivide off and help you build. Or if you don't have some sort of privileged foot in the door, you can't be here. And that's a huge problem. To my mind, as someone who is passionate about, and is very involved in this disability, the community of disabled people in Vermont, it's a problem for our town, that our town would be better if we had different people here, if we weren't all sort of very similar.
Thank you for the answer. Well, a lot of them have already been answered, but this is nice basic question. Talk about your specific community issue concerns that you would address as a select board member. I mean, we're already talking about it, but might as well.
Yeah,
continue.
I think the two issues of diversity within the town around race, socioeconomic, gender identity, disabled community, all those things are super important, and they all dovetail with affordable housing. So I think that is sort of the linchpin. I do think we've been talking on the BCA about, or the Board of Abatement, which is sort of the same people, but about these floods, about the environmental situation that, I think it's Barry that have a financial crisis because people's houses got destroyed and they aren't paying their taxes now because their taxes don't have to be paid. And the school gets its money regardless. The town has to pay the school.
Right.
So if the school budget is passed, the town's paying that bill. And if people don't have the houses, the town's not getting the budget. And I think that hasn't been a problem here so far, but I think that's something that we need to have in mind. We need to kind of be thoughtful about what if we had massive damage to housing here and lost some of our tax base. And I see that as a problem with the town school relationship. I'm not sure if that's even in the purview of Jericho and MMU, but what was your question?
Well,
things I was interested. Yeah. So, and honestly, to be perfectly upfront and honest, my thought is that this position is going to be sort of a way for whoever to dip their toe into select boardness. And there's not going to be a way to come in here and be like, okay, we're changing stuff right around now. Like, we're going to basically come in and keep the plane in the air and get ready for town meeting and get the budget pulled together and think about what's appropriate to be asking the townspeople for, and that's reasonable to get that passed. And then, to my mind, like, if I were to be appointed to the board, I think I would then run in March, then sort of like, okay, so we need to talk about what things, not that I'm going to be myopic. I'm like, oh, I'm only doing the budget. I don't want to hear about anything else. but it feels like it's sort of a kind of in a kind of a holding pattern for a little bit for this position until it's elected for, I think it will be, you have one more year on the board, correct?
Yes.
So it'll be a 1-year election. So those are my thoughts, that I think that affordable housing and sort of being mindful about climate change and the environment and its potential impact on Jericho are sort of the things that feel like are most pressing to the town right now, in my mind.
Well, you mentioned Barry. I mean, you've got the governor talking about having to move a chunk of Barry away from, just move it.
Right.
And that's plus, hundreds of millions of dollars of town damage to the state buildings.
Yeah.
But since you talk about climate change, I have one of the things that we get to talk about in the updates is the Vermont Municipal Vulnerability Index. I've been attending webinars on that. So it's going to be a tool to be used.
To measure your exposure, basically.
Yes, with all different aspects, whether it's socioeconomic or actually physical or whatever. It's a vulnerability index. So I will talk about that later, but there's a whole bunch of more, there's another. It should come online hopefully in March. But the state is thinking about that as part of the climate action plan and the climate committee.
And just to bring us full circle to, I think, Wayne's first question, if there were 5 people on the board, it feels like that would be the kind of work, that sort of forward thinking and preparatory, that's the word, work, that if it could be more than just you involved in that and learning about that. If there was 2 people on the board who could be learning about that and sort of, I work very well with other people. I have trouble thinking of stuff on my own. Like if I sit down with someone and get going back and forth, I can generate ideas and get energized and sort of get my thoughts out, my ideas out in a cogent way. So if I were on that committee, I would want to have someone to talk to say, how do you see this impacting us? What do you think we should be focusing on here? Which you guys can't do with only 3 of you.
And there's a lot of webinars out there.
Yeah.
Since I'm on so many committees. Well, you have a minute left. If there's anything else you want to say about yourself?
Nothing comes to mind. No. What I was going to try to say, and I'll probably mess it up and then regret saying it at all, is that 6 years ago, I started, I've been on motorcycles my whole life, and I've been racing motorcycles for 30 years. I just started road racing, like on tracks, like paved tracks. And I just stopped. But 6 years ago, I started racing motocross, which my wife was not excited about because it's I got a bunch of broken bones. But anyways, that motocross dirt bike community is, I'm going to say 85% way right-wing, conspiracy theory, Trump supporting people.
Kind of like going to the Johnson mud bog years ago.
100%. What being a part of that community for 6 years gave me some insight that I did not have as a liberal, affluent Jericho resident who worked in education where everybody is liberal and affluent. And being a part of that community, I got an insight. I feel like I have an understanding of people who I am diametrically opposed to politically and just in like core belief values. So I think that I have found that in the last 6 years, I brought that to my school conversations more. When people are like, oh, well, that kid shows up with a Trump hat, and that I'm able to sort of say, well, yeah, he does. But keep in mind, like where he's coming from, he's in this situation and he's being sold a bill of goods about why he's in this situation. And it is very clear to him why he is poor and you are rich. you need to sort of be able to think about how he's thinking about the world and not just say that kid's parents are idiots. Even if you think they are, I just think it's important to be able to understand where the other side is coming from, even when the other side is 100% wrong. And I feel like that has been an important, I mean, I only have 1 year left teaching, but at this stage of my career, like an important realization for me about the kids that I work with and the families that I work with. I think is applicable here as well.
Well, thank you.
I think
Yeah.
that sentiment is what's missing in our country right now.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I
Exactly.
mean, that's literally, I mean,
On both
that and cell phones are going to be the end of democracy.
I
Yeah.
believe that second one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cell phones. I think cell phones might be the end of humanity,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
but that's
But
not,
to your
that's not the
point-
Jericho.
They're really
That's,
cool,
that's
though.
not our problem. They are
They can
super
do
cool.
stuff.
to your point, I heard the other night someone say, nobody is a villain in their own movie.
Yeah. Oh, that was on NPR. I don't know where I heard that, but yes, I heard exactly that. Right.
That's cool.
And that's
I-
100% true.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
Yeah, right.
really interesting.
right. Everyone thinks that, yeah.
Right.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Have fun.
Thank you. The next is review and considering approving allocation of ARPA monies to the Jericho Town Library Building. We've talked about this several times, but realize we've never voted on it and it needs to be voted on to actually allocate that funding.
So I make a motion to allocate $100,000 of the ARPA money to the Jericho Town Library for the purpose of ADA and other matters that the Jericho Town Board may feel necessary.
Yeah, and what we can do is, because it has to go to an already existing fund. You can't just put something with ARPA funding, say, library, and we have a building fund. So, and it would, it would go to the building fund, but it's allocated for the library.
I second that motion.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Now, the next one is review and consider purchase.
Jeff, anything to
That
add?
was a worthwhile trip, huh, Jeff? Thank you very much.
I mean, it's official because we have to designate the funding. I got more information on that too.
I thought it was a very interesting discussion.
It was.
Too, and I'm glad that we have some three candidates to the select board.
Yeah, they are.
But I think it was really nice to listen to the discussion about the town.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
The DRB, and I'm glad I was able to hear and listen to it.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you were here too. I mean, because there's a,
And that
Lot.
the 100,000 does not go nearly far enough,
no,
according to your presentation the other night, but at least that's a good start. Thank you.
thank you.
I said call the budget.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you. Perfect.
Well,
Hey,
I tell you,
I don't think my video is working, but it's Catherine from Jericho Town Library. I just wanted to say thank you as well. We really appreciate it.
Hey, Catherine,
Thank you.
sorry, I
Hi,
didn't
Catherine.
nice.
Thanks,
see you
Catherine.
out there.
To the other Catherine in the room.
Thanks for
Thank,
coming.
yeah.
Yeah, it was, would echo what Jeff said. That was really interesting to hear all of the candidates for the select board. But thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Hey, of greater importance, how's the bathroom floor?
It's so amazing. Oh, Tom did so much hard work and also got some people to help who did a lot of hard work, and everything is back to normal and even better than before. So that was really nice since it was just in time for the snow.
It's good. That is terrific. That is wonderful.
Here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it seems we keep buying trucks. It doesn't, it wasn't that long. I mean, there's been like a real rash of truck buying over the last few years.
Well, it's interesting. It may seem like the traffic is doubled, mostly because we've had to order so far in advance.
That's right,
That's really what the request is to
because it's
provide
FY,
the green light to get in line for paying for it 2 years from now.
yeah, because it's FY 25, yeah.
Right.
Because it's
But
still taking
FY
that long.
25 is only, I always forget the FYs. All right, so we're in.
Two Julys from now, it'll be there.
We're FY 24.
Yep.
And so it'll be,
So 1 July from now.
Right. FY 25 starts.
Yeah.
Right, so.
Yeah.
Well, I get it.
So you can't really,
Yeah, because we used to be able to do that.
you can't really look in the budget and say, oh, we had that for FY 25. It's not really presented that way.
I know, it used to be that we could see that, where all the different trucks, and,
Okay,
yeah, is there a truck?
I know it. I don't think there's a truck page. That's why.
Yeah, yeah, we should put the truck page back in there, because that helps, I think,
Yeah,
everybody
This is just the budget stuff, so.
understand.
Is it under the, is it in reserve?
Because, truck, because there was the schedule of when things get replaced. And
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, we do have a spreadsheet.
That might be worth putting in.
yeah, because I know it used to be there, and I didn't see one, but it doesn't mean it's not there, because things have shifted around, but yeah, it does help people as well as the select board, because we didn't used to have to do it so far in advance.
Sure.
And it throws us,
Yeah.
but obviously, the other question I have on it is, was there only one bidder?
That's great. Well, I don't think it is I gotta be honest, I don't even know.
Because it says consider purchase of the truck, and this is the only
I just assume this is, I just assume we traditionally work with a local vendor.
well, we have, but there are times when Freightliner in Milton has been a low bidder, but the last couple times he hasn't, so maybe,
Presentations.
and
I have to say, I feel uncomfortable voting for something when there isn't even a second bidder on it.
or at least tell us if there was a second bidder or not, if there's only one
Gotta
bid.
be honest, it was not even on my radar. I just assumed that this is the vendor they work with.
Well, I mean, this is where we bought the last two, so maybe that's why Freightliner didn't even bid. I don't know, but
Because before that, we didn't,
yeah,
because there was a little bit of a rub, I'll just be frank.
Yeah.
Because Clark's was not getting some of these, there were reasons that, went back and forth, and some cost for some of it.
well, and there was International was a crappy truck for a while.
Yeah, well, that was one of the reasons that I didn't enumerate right now, but
Yeah, I
yes.
guess that was the other, it seems like there is a preference amongst the road crew for the International.
Well, and they've been using them for quite a
Yeah,
while
but-
now.
The select board that can't be the criteria for a major purchase like this.
I get it.
And,
Yeah.
and it, even if we.
Yep.
Even if we said we have to get an international, that doesn't mean that we have to go, right? Like other people sell them.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
I don't know. I
So
mean, I would have
apologize
totally
for
missed
not
this, but.
Giving you a call ahead of time,
No.
because I didn't pick up on that, but this is too big a thing to have just.
Well,
only
basically,
have one bid on.
yeah, basically, I mean, if,
$250,000, it's a lot of money.
right, and that's what I was gonna say, is there's no trade-in or anything on this, but it's just,
Not this one.
boy, yeah, that's a lot of money all at once.
Yeah.
So this is an extra truck?
This one is not gonna be a trade-in on.
Okay,
They're gonna keep the existing one that would be in line for the trade and put it into service for salt, and they're basically gonna reallocate the use.
So
Okay.
could we suggest then that other bids are solicited, or at least there's a report that other vendors are not interested in bidding? And then the select board.
And then maybe let's just get a little information on that.
Yeah.
That whole transaction.
Right.
Additional.
yeah, because, I mean, even if you, but you're right, other people sell internationals as well, but,
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with,
No.
but
no, at one point, the real problem with the international was that, way back when I first got on the board and had to be the one doing the research. International did not meet EPA standards at the time. And we felt it was important to meet those standards, and Freightliner.
For exhaust.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was a very unique system that was hard to take care of, and you almost had to take the engine apart to, fix it and stuff like that. So it would have been a cost nightmare. And, you know, I mean, here I was reading Truck Digest and everything else. I mean, it's kind of.
I'd almost be tempted, especially if it's
I'd
adding.
like a picture of that one.
If it's adding a truck, it almost, oh. I think we need to hear from the road crew, but it
Yeah.
almost seems like a bad year to do it, right? If we were like in the middle of building a new garage or like the next year, we'd end up with a new, you know what I mean? So like,
Yeah, it's $250,000 right there.
yeah. So, anyway,
But we did, yes, Jim.
I'd like to give you some feedback on it. I own a bunch of these great things. Maintenance, they don't program themselves for failure. It depends upon how well they're maintained. Very particular about lubrications and methods of driving. I think it's something that you need some expertise on. But if you just went to the subject of the bidding, how you spec a truck
Oh, yeah.
materially determines who will actually bid on it.
Exactly.
So you can negotiate with the dealer that you would be willing to pay the average of the lowest 3 bids that they won with other towns. And so there's methodologies by how you get around Wayne's concern, because one of the things that's really important is if you've got a high service level, close proximity, and you're not driving the vehicle long distances. So when you put the quality control and the total package issues together for doing the feasibility analysis, there is a safe harbor. And for example, the EPA, the urea nitrogen, to those people that know a lot about engines, actually reduced reliability and actually was worse for air pollution, but sitting there on a test. And if you remember Volkswagen,
Mm-hmm.
Volkswagen got around the Volkswagen vehicles that they got sued by the EPA for were actually yielding substantially greater mileage and lower pollution because there was less stuff coming out of it. But they chose to smart their way around what they thought was ignorance at the EPA. So if this stuff's complicated and it requires people who really spend a lot of time.
And you do make a good point. If the service center is here,
Right.
rather than going up to Charlie Boys or wherever the other places that would service these things,
that's true.
that in and of itself
Yeah.
is a factor that may not be reflected specifically in the bid, but yet it's important. It's downtime, it's staff time.
Yep.
All of those. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. So.
And the same thing that I made comment about for the garage, I'm not sure that the town of Jericho should actually be in this business. That it is a business to operate vehicles and.
You're thinking of Charlotte, that's what you're thinking.
Or there's lots of different models. But the difficulty of insurance, the difficulty of this and that, so there might well be a model that would better fit Jericho. And I mean, just think about Governor Peck Road. We turn our trucks around, and turning trucks around is a hazard. Making a joint venture deal with Richmond and Underhill and sort of working through all of that it might be better to have a pool of trucks and common drivers and different models, because if you think about the state, once you're on a road, you can have a trailer with additional stuff in it so that you don't have to run back and forth. If you have a trailer system, you obviously you're not going to drive one up Bulger Hill Road and turn it around, but doing a master model of what business we're in and how to be in it. And when you've got a $3.5 million budget, there's an opportunity there to take a look at all these individual pieces, because I would be surprised in the absence of that level of analysis and study and objectivity that people are going to sign up for a $300,000 additional increase on an annual basis to build a garage when costs are up 78% and interest is doubled.
So for the purpose of tonight, it sounds like
We can table it?
we can table it. I don't know. I don't share your
Yeah.
charge, but
I think that requires a motion too.
I did. Well,
Well,
we're
we're reviewing and considering it, so we're not.
You pay for something
Yeah, that's
based
true.
upon their low bids is what you're willing to pay for the product. So that you don't get into a favored nation status. If you will.
So you need a motion or something?
Eric,
It says consider, so I feel like
we
we
reviewed
did
it
consider it, but
and we reviewed it.
we're
We
not
didn't
taking
take
any
it.
action right now.
Okay,
I think.
So we can put it back on for the.
Yep.
16th.
Yeah,
well,
Or-
if there's
We
some,
Have another.
yeah, assuming there's a bid or.
or at least a discussion of why and find
Yeah,
out.
why are we adding one to our fleet?
It-
I'm more concerned about that than I am about the bid. The
Yeah.
bid seems like a
Yeah.
thing that we need to do, but
Yeah,
This would have been of Paula and John's alley. I should have asked if they joined.
oh, that's all right. Big night.
well, it was a long night. I mean, a lot of important stuff. So anyway, next on the agenda is select board updates, including the highway maintenance facility. So you might as well go first because you're on the agenda.
Katie, so we are looking at, so just to put it out there, looking to our next meeting. So the meeting on the 16th, you will be receiving, we'll be having a public meeting on the town plan that will be conducted by you all, and at that point, you officially have responsibility for any additional amendments or edits.
Right,
So that's something to look forward to. We also.
the fact is that's at a time certain, so it, you do the public hearing at whatever time we're starting and the regular meeting comes after that.
Oh, okay.
'Cause
So
that's-
that has,
Because that's a hearing as opposed to a meeting. And
Oh.
that's a time certain, you start it. Yeah, so we are responsible.
highway maintenance facility.
Yeah, I know, it says. Is there any?
What, not really. So what I discussed with Brian yesterday when we were doing budget work was. I think the next step is we need to be able to put together a ballot question for consideration. With a specific. Cost per thousand of homestead value attached to it.
Which we have rough estimates of that from last time.
Would be provided, so, I mean, I guess I'm asking you the question from a statutory standpoint, so you would need to approve that. Before it can go on as a ballot.
Yeah, I mean, see,
I
some
feel
of,
like we need to have more
there's more discussion, you can have more discussion of it, and it doesn't have to be done now, it has to be done when we fill out the warning. Is it, is it going to be that's an Australian ballot item. And so basically, all that stuff gets finalized in January, and it's either, but Jessica may have a different timeline for that, but it's typically the end of January. It all happens before it goes to the printer, but that allows us to have more discussion of that.
Yeah, you really got to get it done by mid-January.
Right,
The
really
printer
good.
deadline
It's
is
the end.
End January.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my question, so does there have to be? So does the question for the ballot have to go in front of you for approval?
Yes. Just
You
like,
wanna Wait until January.
yeah, I
Well,
think
yeah, I
we
guess
should
I'm a
talk
little,
more about it.
I'm a
actually.
little confused over. Well, I understand the process. I understand that we got to decide whether it goes on or not. It just feels like a big decision to throw a $4.5 million bond on the budget or on the ballot without. I mean, we've had really good report. I don't know. I guess I don't know what else I need, but I just, you know what I mean? Like it
Well, there
just
should be
feels
more public, you
Yeah.
should have more meetings, but
it's coming unfortunately so fast.
So what we had
it's
discussed.
just the same as like we did for the old Red Mill.
Mhm.
And for the this Conservation Reserve Fund and the mobs thing, mobs was a
The land trust then?
yeah, that was sort of a non-binding, but but the other stuff was binding, so. But all those were approved by us to go, on the ballot, and Jessica takes care of that.
So maybe December, I don't know what our schedule is gonna look like for December 7th, but maybe for that one, we put a big thing on the, on the first thing on the agenda, and it's just a discussion, and so people have an opportunity to see it there, you know what I mean? And so like we don't feel like they're like, oh, where did this come from out of the blue? I don't know.
Well, so my understanding, we'd had some discussion about trying to schedule open houses.
Yeah.
So that people would come and see the garage and actually get a better understanding of
Oh, that's a really
what the
good one. I
current
forgot about that.
hardships and what the state of the facility is.
Yeah.
And maybe it would make sense to do, we talked about trying to do that before the end of the year. Maybe it makes sense to do that and then have a broader discussion or
Have an open house.
Yeah.
Then
Or
a
two open
vote.
houses, yeah.
And then have another, once it's official, then have another open house or something after that.
Okay.
Right, so yeah.
Even if we gotta pay Matt to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd be happy to do it.
Yeah, and the other thing is, because if you have the open house or two in November, then you going to your December thing, and then you
I
get,
just feel like November's shot. We've got the town plan thing on the 16th and
yeah.
we've got the budget. We just,
so they could do open houses. Obviously, they're not at select board meetings, but they do open houses in November. People can have seen it, and then we have our discussion in December, a big discussion in December. You have the pictures, you have more of the information that we actually had been talking about this prior to COVID, prior to Todd leaving. I mean, it started before 2020.
and I know Wayne's been good about like throwing feelers out there, but the feelers he was throwing out were like for 4 or 5 years. Now we're gonna be like,
Yeah,
hey,
we got it.
remember we said like 26, 27?
Yeah.
We need it,
Exactly.
Yeah,
and
we
we're
did.
ready for we were at that meeting or we read that report and we already had that shock and,
Because we had, thought about
Being
that.
mindful about some kind of campaign is like a pejorative kind of word. People use it in a pejorative sense now, but the hump is to get the bond approved. Once it's approved, the project is gonna happen. But the energy seems to have to be whenever the bond is gonna, if it's gonna happen this March or next March, is to make sure that once that's official, that there's enough momentum and Matt's report is parceled out. So you take a little bits of it, and John or whoever takes this under their wing or something. I may have a tiny bit to do with the highway department thing after I'm done, but to put these things out on Front Porch Forum. Here's the thing with the water, and then there's a little paragraph. Then 2 weeks later, here's the thing
That's
with
right, you
the
have to.
septic, and there's always these little nibble things that keep it on the front burner so that when the actual vote occurs, either this town meeting or next, people feel like they've been informed and they remember that, oh yeah, there was a discussion before they took the vote. I remember that, those kinds of things.
Right.
yeah, that Wayne always has such a great way of capturing what's in my head without.
Well, that's gonna end really soon.
I know, I don't like that.
But yes, we've been talking about this before even 2020, because we knew it was coming, but because we did put money into weatherizing the building at one point, because we had an audit. And then
Then we had the structural repairs.
and we had the structural repairs with the column. We thought that was going to help for a while. And then Todd, before COVID hit, actually started with to get a proposal to actually do a structural analysis. And then COVID, and then he left, and all of a sudden it's a lot worse shape than we even thought it was at the time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a so the open houses is an opportunity for people to see what the state of need is, but what you're advocating for is sort of like not a publicity campaign, but a public information.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because that's really what it's got to be.
And
So they're not just like, especially imagine this for whichever one of these four suckers we picked to join us, right? They're all of a sudden we're like, so-and-so joined and there's a $4.5 million bond
I know.
on the ballot. Like what the heck is going on? So I just think, we gotta, before we decide to get it on there, we've gotta have some sort of discussion, to hear points like Jim made or points like we got from Susan in email, like
Yeah,
those are literally the only 2 points I've heard on this, other than from the engineer and I feel
and the
like-
road crew.
yeah,
and the road crew, although I actually personally haven't heard from the road crew on it. I know I've heard through Paula and through you from there,
Yeah.
but anyway, I think it needs to get on the ballot. I want to be clear. I think we need to get it on the ballot, but I
Right.
think we owe it to the town to somehow get a little more information out there about it.
Well, and you think about how the mobs worked Front Porch Forum and all, when they were trying to do their thing. They really did utilize all
And
the,
that didn't involve any money,
no,
but they still had this education campaign. Yeah,
right. And
Yeah.
why it was important.
yeah. I mean, this one's really different because it's gonna hurt
Yeah,
financially, or people are gonna
Well,
notice it.
here's
they'll notice it,
another
but
interesting
we have a
perspective.
way of softening it anyway.
Yeah.
Thank God for that.
I work at your discretion. Is it appropriate for me to be doing the public information campaign?
Sure.
Absolutely.
And
I mean-
Especially the angry people.
fortunately or unfortunately, the best vehicle is Front Porch Forum.
Absolutely. And it'll be on, it should be on the website and
It
different,
already is.
and
It's been on the website.
I did notice that right off.
Whole-
Yeah, that.
but we also, as
Whole
part,
section of the website that we.
as part of each of those information bites, though, the website should be linked. For more information, go here. For more information, go here, every single time.
Yeah, that's.
I mean-
I think, to be really frank, I think that it needs to be, the information campaign needs to be, involve more people than just John.
yeah.
There are elements in the community that might be a little bit more reluctant to sign up for this bond vote. And I know Roger lives in Underhill, but Roger has a lot of credibility. He's been in there for a billion years. The
Yeah.
Highway Department. He's Underhill, so that's a bad example. But if there was a couple people like that who
Right.
said, I've been over to that building and it's horrible. We need to do
That's-
something there.
That's part of my
I
thought
think that
too.
would be
and
helpful.
Oh, yeah. I
I
mean,
think when I was asking that question, I think there would be to have a more diversified representation of trying to float out.
oh, yeah.
the
That's a good idea.
benefits. So if we can identify some people who we know are familiar with the project, are familiar with the challenges that the building presents functionally.
I mean, actually, Roger's not a bad example because he has credibility, even though he lives in Underhill. He actually has to work in that building.
Yeah, I don't know how he feels about it, but I just know.
But
people-
that could,
some
like,
people
but you
would
could
listen
use
to
something
him.
like that in his little blurbs, right?
Right.
Like, hey, here's a quote from Roger, long time.
Right, you're right. It wouldn't take it, Roger, anything other than, okay, you can use my name.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's all you would need.
yeah.
And you get a couple of those kind of people, whatever that kind of people,
Well, it's people who
work with equipment and
I mean, who live in that building. And, yeah, and
Randy. I
And-
mean, I don't know what Randy thinks about it, but that would be worth me calling.
that's a
him.
good point. Yeah, people that are in that line of work, you
Yeah.
know,
oh, that's good, because Randy helped with big time with the ORM.
fire department.
Yeah.
You know, what is,
Jim Carroll.
Yeah, Jim
Yeah.
Carroll.
I suggest that you seriously consider delegating this to a committee of people that are qualified to dig into all these issues. I've built things since I was 12 years old. And when someone wants to spend $4 million, in fact, I had this conversation with Don Wells from DEW Construction when we were building a multi-million-dollar building. And I said to him, Don, I said, every time I ask you a question, you come back with the same answer. And it was a Barco Pruden, because he was a dealer for Barco Pruden. Well, I went and negotiated with Jefford Steel across and I said to the Jeffords, who was an engineer, who's unfortunately deceased, I said, I want to know how far you can go before the beams become more expensive. And he said, well, let it be 43 feet. And I said, so the fewer columns I have, the more space I have, the easier it is to move forklifts around. So, but it's an expertise of functionality based upon the people who are actually doing the work.
Yeah, there's been some discussion already about forming some committee, once this grows legs, and it hasn't quite grown legs, that it would be useful, not only to oversee not only to help vet the project, but also to help sell the project. Because then you've got a number of people who have a background who can, maybe help make that
I'm just saying to you guys that I remember studying the Hawthorne studies. Does anybody remember the Hawthorne studies?
in psychology.
The Hawthorne studies were psychological studies done for industrial purposes by General Electric to determine how to increase the productivity of manufacturing.
Okay, so I did remember a little. That's
Yeah,
That's
you're
good.
pretty good.
I only took
But
abnormal
the
psych.
product of the Hawthorne studies was they were trying to figure out what was the best lights for the manufacturing operations. And they couldn't correlate the data after 5 or 6 different bulbs. Now they're in the light bulb business and they want to sell things. So and yet they're one of the world's biggest manufacturers. And you know what they discovered? Changing lights demonstrated to the workers that you were interested in their well-being, and that had a greater impact than the quality of the light itself. So if there's a concern about sanitary, about safety, then someone should look at how to fix that on a contemporary basis to demonstrate to those people that their well-being. But you don't need a $4.5 million project to do that, because this is possibly one of the worst times to try to build something, particularly try to build something that you want to last on a capital basis for 40 or 50 years.
No kidding.
In a complex environment. So I think you've got some phenomenally skilled people in town. And Randy from Allegiance, I don't know whether you could get them to plug in, but where the trucks are going really makes a big deal about how you would design a structure. You don't have those types of people employed, and trying to rent them is very difficult. I think this could turn into a very positive project, but I would suggest you slow it down a little bit. Get a quality team of people that are actually interested in doing that. Get their enthusiasm. And you remember the group that got put together with respect to the Rivers' property and the fire department. And they took the whole attitude 180 degrees.
I was just saying that exact thing about the fire department study to someone 2 days ago.
And their net bottom line, and I'm not going to bring up the negative, but they pointed very strongly at the flaw in the town of Jericho with respect to the attitude and purview towards that organization that had adversely affected it. So everybody's aiming the guns at the wrong place. And so, but that committee said,
Yeah, that was remarkable. That was remarkable.
But there are a lot of people who really were targeting
Yeah.
them.
But
just
your point's
imagine
well
if we
taken.
continued with that riff.
Yeah.
And so I'm just suggesting you've got some real successes. And if you choose to pick some of your successes, I think there's some people that you could bring into a positive environment and give them an opportunity.
Yeah, I think with
to help you.
the
I
right
think
ground
we
rules.
need to
and
move on though, because
Yep.
we've got the rest of the meeting.
We
I'm
still have
sorry.
But I just want to say,
Yeah.
I like the idea of a committee, except the last thing that I ever think of, I combine with committee is the word speed.
Right.
We're just out of time. Like the fact that the report that we read.
Yeah.
And Wayne said it best, we are embarrassed of what we're asking our employees to work in, right? And so I like the idea of really getting a better brain trust looking at it. So it's not me who's never built a building before coming up with it, making this decision. But at the same time, I'm balancing that of Yet every day, we're still asking these guys to go in and work in there, right? And so I want to make sure we have urgency. So
From what I've
that's,
read, you really have not considered what feasible options there are to mitigate that without going to a monster.
we had a
budget.
really detailed report though.
Very detailed.
And he's not saying this is what has to be built.
No.
But the report was on, here's what you've got, and that part was clear and
And we
like,
have to do
sure,
something.
yeah, so anyway.
And we have these very expensive trucks that are not being, they're having to sit outside because they don't fit in the garage.
But Bart, I'll just say this to you. I own some of those trucks. One of the reasons why you leave them outside is to prevent the corrosion and breakdown. And you use special tools to keep the air that keeps the brakes from freezing up dry. And so there's technologies, there's pros and cons of putting a salt truck inside of a building
To
and then
warm up.
driving
Right.
it out
Right.
because you've warmed
I
up
would-
the
I could see
product
that.
that's
Yeah,
in the
that's a
good
truck,
point.
and all
Yep.
of a sudden that
Yep.
starts freezing.
I can wrap my mind around that then.
Absolutely,
Okay,
yeah,
well, thank you,
absolutely.
Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Trucks that are outside. It's
Yeah.
other machinery.
It's the other machinery, yeah. Yeah.
Any other updates?
You got any other updates?
Yeah,
Then I'll do mine.
so, wanted to put it on your radar that the meeting on the 21st of January, Thursday before the holiday weekend. And I'm doing that only because, as we move toward trying to get the town plan across the finish line, that's gonna demand more and more time at upcoming meetings. So I wanna know, I think we need to think about whether we're gonna have that meeting or not, and if we're not, it would compress the next, we'll have.
Oh,
That'll put us in a
which,
position we'll
which, are you talking about November or
December 21st.
December?
I'm sorry.
December, yeah. Because you said, I thought you said January went.
Wayne,
Thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
be talking.
appreciate
Yeah.
it. One last thing. Geothermal, if you're building buildings, you want to be energy efficient. One of the things you think of first is building them underground. And you have a major geothermal heat sink over there called a solid waste facility.
That's right.
Creativity can save a lot of money and also look very creative.
Spafford's good at putting them in.
To a project like that, I think is a mistake.
Except,
So any other updates?
Yes, so we went to Municipal Day in Montpelier 2 Fridays ago. And there is a funding package that is about to be announced that will help defray the cost of these 3-acre stormwater permits. Which is good.
that would be good, yeah.
We're not talking an extraordinary amount of money, but we are significantly invested. And it was also brought to my attention that as we move toward looking at road specifications and taking over private roads, the delineation of responsibility for those permits needs to be front and center too, because the last thing we want to do is co-own a permit with another HOA.
Right,
So we're gonna have to be thinking.
that's right, because they all have stormwater permits.
The bylaw modernization grant was submitted. Linda submitted that on Wednesday. The next grant on the horizon is the next iteration of the transportation alternatives grant, which will be submitted on or before the 8th of December. So we'll need to put that in front of you all for cost share approval for the next meeting.
Great.
And we're trying to get, we've reached out to the last grant that we didn't receive, we got a couple pieces of feedback. One is we're trying to more clearly delineate the economic impact and benefit of finishing that last section of the multimodal trail. And the other is to try to not pin down, but try to work collaboratively with the high school and the school district around their intention. So if we're able to bring the sidewalk across the Lee River onto the MMU property, what will be next? We're probably not gonna, because it's not our property, we wouldn't include anything beyond
No,
getting it there. So we need to know what their investment is, gravel path,
That's a good point.
and getting a letter of support from them would, put our application in more favorable light.
well, the other thing to push is it's public safety, because
Yeah.
we had more, actually Robin Bennett did it multiple times because he was so afraid of those kids running and the potential, if you
I
remember.
remember that, yes.
Yeah,
Um,
I've seen kids walking across that bridge early morning, walking to school from the village.
Yeah, it's a public safety issue
It is
because
terrible.
kids do walk, they run, the track runs through there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a real need to actually have pedestrian safety through there.
Absolutely. Want to have a joint meeting with our new dog warden and Jen Sophie from Town of Underhill next Thursday. And we're also gonna have actually, I guess it's probably better not to discuss on the record.
Is that it?
That's it.
I did, since the last one, I had 3 different webinars. One is the Vermont Municipal Vulnerability Index, and that's coming out of the Climate Action Office. I mean, it's funded, it's a grant funded thing, so they to get a tool out for the environment. And so I took lots of notes, but the real potential use is for not only for utilities and vulnerable communities, the RPCs, but for municipalities, it's to figure out for your community, figure out your vulnerability and your resilience. And it helps, it's the idea is it will help inform your allocation of resources, what you're going to need to do. It also helps you update your hazard mitigation plan. And a big deal is it provides information for your development decisions of where you put things and how you put them and how you build them. But so they're putting a climate toolkit together, and they're looking at ways to help all this pull together. I mean, the number of topics that they looked at put into this index is phenomenal. But it's gonna come out with no weighting, but it's the ability, they want you to have all these layers of, but still supposed to be user-friendly. And it's the ability to select your vulnerability and resilience factors from your domain to analyze your climate vulnerability. And then the public users will interface with the user guide and its purpose and the functions and output of the tools. And so they hope to have by March 2024, that tool. Yep, the final product.
Which is the toolkit.
Yeah. And it'll be your Municipal Vulnerability Index Toolkit.
Seems like the biggest criteria must be floodplain, and we don't really have a lot of development on floodplain.
No, but it talks about your built environment, your broadband, your power lines, your bridges, your natural environment, the cultural habitat, your invasive, whether you have invasives, the demographics and food insecurity, and other including supply chain and social infrastructure.
Huh.
Yeah, oh God, yeah, I'll tell you. It uses the ARAF rate and stuff for community vulnerability, and it talks about your limited municipal staff capacity, limited municipal financial capacity. I mean,
Okay, so some of those ring a bell.
The staff capacity part started to resonate as soon as he started reading.
I mean, it is just. It's very impressive how they've taken all these aspects and all the different information data banks that are out there.
Is it DEC that's doing the?
It is,
Supporting the program.
ERG. Melanie Sands and ERG are doing it. Also, John and I believe Linda was there, and this was legal parameters of municipal budgeting.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one.
And I went also, but you know, I had notes to shorten all this out. I think they're stuck at the backs of the truck here. But the idea was that I wanted to check on, they talked about the bonding and borrowing capacity and how many different things to consider. And so that was quite interesting, but I really wanted to hear the ARPA update. And the big deal is there that they used to think that December 2026 deadline would be extended.
Mhm.
They've decided, it is really firm. It is baked into stone at this point.
I knew it. Everyone kept saying, oh, they're gonna extend it.
Well, and there's-
I knew it. I
Yeah.
knew they weren't gonna extend it.
Right. And they're about, interesting from reading my municipal newsletter from, you know, the 50 states, there still are about 25% of the municipalities have not spent a nickel.
Mhm.
And that's, it's, but, so, and what they're suggesting that ARPA be obligated by March 31st, that's a little early. Because they said, yeah,
What's obligated mean?
you
Good
do,
question, Wayne.
obligated means just like what we did tonight, we put the money into a reserve fund.
There's a motion on record that
Yes,
said
yes.
X dollars to this thing.
This thing, that is
Okay,
obligated.
well, that's not,
That's not that hard.
That's not that
We're almost
No.
out.
Well, and in fact, you know, but the key is you know, like we had set money aside thinking we could maybe use it to match other funding, like for wastewater. You can't create a fund specifically with ARPA funding and call it whatever you call it. Mine was waiting for wastewater. But you can't, that's not allowed. But if there's existing funds, because the whole purpose initially of the ARPA funding was to replace lost revenue.
so this goes to John's point, which was the last couple months, you've been saying this about, let's start a committee and get this going where we have a group of people who are helping us decide how we're going to spend that money. And it sounds like, especially with this deadline getting firmer, there's more reason to do that now.
And yeah, and just to clarify, it doesn't need to be all of it.
No,
But
No.
I think, Catherine, what you're saying is designate funds that you know are gonna be important to uphold future projects.
right. Because it's a
And
replacement of funds.
Identify them, put them in reserve, and then for, you know, it's really up to the select board to decide if you want to do a community-based project portion of the existing funds, designate that, put it in a fund, and then we get a committee to figure out.
Just like the library, what we just did. But like you're saying, we wanted to have a little, John had mentioned a little community committee to, you know, like, just like we did with the ice rink.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, some, you know,
With a proposal.
some proposals that, you know, impact a greater number of people.
Yeah,
You know, because a lot of folks aren't sitting there waiting for wastewater like we are, kind of thing. So as long as it's done before December of 2024 and you have it put into whatever you're going to do it, because you could spend it directly, use it or use it as a revenue source, or, you know, you can transfer it to your general fund to create a fund balance and then, you know, think through what you're going to do with it. But the key is, if it's a project that you are investing in, you better have that shovel in the ground on January 1st, 2025, because it has to be finished, absolutely finished by December 31st, 2026.
that's pretty soon.
26 or 25?
26. They give you 2 years to get that project done.
Yeah.
Because they figure most construction takes about 2 years.
Wow.
So, but as long as we have it in designated funds, we've already met our commitment, because we took the standard deduction or standard allowance, saying we used it as a revenue replacement.
Right.
So that's good. And then the last one I went to was the regional housing convening, and Sarah, SJ was there. And that was quite interesting because they had a presentation from the CVOEO, which is part of it's now working and it's striving for equity project, and it's looking at fair housing projects. And
This is the one on Monday night.
yeah, it was Monday night, and it's the important, they talked about the CVOEO talked about the importance of inclusionary housing. And this particular grant funded thing is to support local housing committees promoting avenues for citizen housing advocacies across the state. So, you know, there's thing, and they talked about the AI, the one that didn't quite work out for here last year, which is the Architects of America doing little projects for housing committees,
Oh, right,
things
yeah.
like that. And you know, they want to develop a community-based housing advocacy resource so that you can go to them and, you know, find out how to do different things. And their idea is then to connect and support the local housing committees and foster new innovations and community of the group. Then the big deal I was there for was the Home Act. You know, RPC's been talking at it for quite a while because the RPC here is doing a couple of those studies. And but this talked more about it. And there is going to be a shall element that you shall have specific things to address in your, for how you're going to address low to moderate income housing.
Mm.
And they're going to, and the big deal is that it's also switched the, when the ECOS plan is going to be due, they've stretched it out because the state housing assessment was not going to be finished until 2025. It is now going to be finished by March of 2020, early 2024 sometime. And so those housing, and the state is going to give you standing, you know, state housing assessments, you know, go to the county or the regional planning commissions. And then they have to municipalize it so that it goes to the municipalities. And this will be the housing needs.
And what's the timetable on that?
The housing needs assessment is going to come out sometime early next year. And then it'll go to the regional planning commissions. And then they have to, and they, you know, that gives you a target for your area and housing from the state. And then they municipalize it, and then they have to send it out to the municipals. And this is what the state numbers are for you.
So, right, so this is actually, you know, what an incredible opportunity that will be.
Yeah,
Because in all the discussion and all the assertion about what our obligations should be, we'll finally have quantifiable
absolutely.
data,
Yep.
which
Yeah.
I know is something that you've been.
Yeah, and they went through a whole bunch of other things with it because this act, you know, talks about your zoning, and their section 10 of the bill is very specific. It's a by right development, which says the DRB has to allow mixed use building if it meets the zoning. And you cannot change what it looks like based on character of area.
You see how all that plays out politically.
Exactly. That's going to be a toughie. And they, you know, ADUs are now defined in statute. Before they had not been defined. Now they're defined in statute. And they are also defining in statute areas with municipal water and sewer, what that means, and all these different, so, and they talked about a state building code, state, and for buildings, and how it's reducing the parking, and areas, there's some areas that they're even talking about what you do about emergency shelters. And so, however, the RPCs are going to be tasked to be housing navigators. And they're going to work with municipalities, regions, and local housing organizations and private developers to identify housing opportunities, match communities, and funding resources. I like that one. And provide project management.
Wow. So these are paid state positions, or would they be seated within the RPCs or?
Well, yeah, that's what the RPCs are trying to figure out right now. But yes, these are all coming out of that Home Act and will have consequences. And so it probably will have, more staffing at the RPCs. So that's what I did.
It's a lot.
And so any other updates?
I just want to publicly thank Wayne for his service and really appreciate his patience with me as I'm a brand new person into town management and, we're gonna miss you, Wayne. If I say any more, I'm gonna get choked up, but I really appreciate it.
Oh, that was
Thank
hard.
you.
It was hard not to get choked up. There's no question about it.
I've really enjoyed it. I think I add a little bit of value and,
No, what do you?
oh my gosh. And to all of a sudden realize it really is time for me to do something else is,
Yeah, that would
it's
have to
just
be,
kind of a weird feeling.
that'd be that'd be difficult,
Yeah. I did very briefly take a walk with Sabina from my house. I wanted to show her these little bitty connecting trails behind the elementary school.
Yep.
Oh, that's
go
great.
all the way to Starboard and Packard. So that was useful. I think it'll plant the seed with her that these paths do have utility. Although again, they're from a different time.
Yeah.
They're from the 60s and the 50s when there were a million kids all over riding bikes and stuff, just
Yeah.
like the way I grew up with, 30 kids on my block. I could play with at any point if I wanted to. And now you see 2 or 3, but they're there.
Yeah.
And even just when we were walking, Sabina and I, there were people out walking and saying hello. And so that was important.
To that point, we trick or treated with, in Griswold. And
Aw,
I said, and later, my older daughter was gonna meet someone and go in Kettle Creek.
Yeah.
Kettle Creek, I mixed up,
oh, yeah.
why do I always mix up that word?
Starboard, Jericho East.
Further down on the left, Katie, Christie Lane, Christie.
Oh, Christian Lane.
For whatever reason, I mixed those two up. Anyway, I'm like, Wayne's always talking about how you can get, we should be able to get there. According to Wayne, we should be able to get from Griswold over to,
You can.
over to Packard, and then from there you could just go down and we didn't try it, but it was a little cool.
And then I did bring some studies that I foisted on Linda, some really old stuff. A plan for rivers that I thought she might find interesting, that one of the residents of
Oh, yeah.
the center, she said, oh, I've heard of this, as well as the fire department study, which was a big deal in town. And then some of the multimodal paths. So I did have a chance to catch up with her and Chris just a
Good.
little bit.
That's
But
terrific.
that's all I have really to report.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you, Wayne. Next is we're going to approve the minutes and what did I do with my minutes? Oh, my God. Oh, they're there. I only had one correction. And that was page 1, line 13. JTB needs to be moved out and put a name with, and that's Joel Bedard.
With that, I will make a motion to approve the minutes of October 19th.
Second,
All those in favor say aye.
I
And when we sign the warrants, we'll go into executive session because we have, and you know the rules.
I make a motion to go into executive session to talk about things that premature disclosure of the information would be detrimental to parties involved and for reasons of personnel and legal. And I'd like to invite John Abbott to that executive session.
second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Good night, everybody.
Good night, all.
I